here's something we hope you'll really like.
It's time for Planet Green.
We have launched.
We have completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Trees. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan.
We're traveling through a dimension both of sound and ideas. We're at a place where the mind can comprehend and devise a wireless transmitter, measure time and light. Astonishing? Perhaps. But you can find it in a place that's known as
Planet Green Trees.
Attention, ladies and gentlemen, the Planet Green Trees show is underway with your host, attorney Michael Komorn.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All righty.
We have launched.
Welcome, everybody. Planet Green Trees is officially episode number 463. We're calling it Slow Train Coming. That will be revealed later. I'm your host, Michael Komorn of Komorn Law, PLLC. We're very excited about tonight's show. We know you're probably watching live on Facebook and can watch also on YouTube on the Komorn Law YouTube station. And we want to say hello to our listeners right now. And we have a very exciting show, topics galore, very special guest who's going to be calling in at 8:30. And let me go through our introductions here as we do, introducing both the community entertainment and the topics that we're going to be addressing tonight. First, from the bunker, we've got both Justin and Tommy, who are not visible and can only sometimes hear us, but I want to thank those guys for being here and certainly for their outstanding technical prowess. Okay. We don't hear back from them. That's right. So then we've got, of course, moving around the room, the man who looks like the CEO. He, of all the REM albums, his favorite is Monster. Figure that out. He is the founder of Michigan Parents for Compassion. His name is Jim Powers. Please welcome Jim Powers.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be here on day 794 of the glad to see everybody here, healthy, happy. Glad to be with my friend virtually, and looking forward to a great show tonight.
Thank you, Jim. We have, moving around the room, Amanda Jocelyn of the Elevation Station. We've never yet determined what her favorite album is, but I do believe she likes Cannabis. I'm not sure, pretty sure.
I love Cannabis. I love Cannabis, and my favorite album kind of shifts with the mood. So depending on what day it is, I might get into something more than others. But I'm looking forward to the show tonight. Welcome, everybody.
Based on the limited information you gave us, the music may even shift with the cannabis.
Yeah, it sure does. It sure does, because it certainly affects the mood, you know.
That's right. We have, okay, so we got a lot to get to. Steve Miller, of course, is here. Steve Miller from Steve Miller Band. Of course, you've heard his albums. Like a week ago, later 90s, I think it was called Abracadabra. He's a retired police officer, also from Canton, Michigan. He's got a lot of stuff in his treasure chest that he's been sharing with my son, Nathan.
Yes.
And I can't thank him enough for being Uncle Steve and a good friend of mine. Please welcome Steve Miller. Steve Miller.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And I'm glad Nathan likes the stuff.
I should say the backpack that I got, which is a great gift of giveaways, is Canton Police Department on it. It's see-through backpack. See-through
backpack and plastic.
And plastic. So if the kid wanted to hide something,
can't hide it.
Can't hide it. Can't
Not today.
It's great for the beach. It's a great beach backpack.
Yes. He's very excited about it. It also came with a Spider-Man helmet for his biking, which he's not taken off. He's been sleeping in for 3 days, actually. So we got to talk to you about that. Anyways, moving around the room here, we see that Alan Peisner, also in some circles known as the Rasta Rabbi, and also the man who carries in his computer the library of medical marijuana cases issued from the Michigan courts after he stole that idea from me halfway through. But I want to give him credit. He's been very organized about it, carries it around with him, and he's my good friend. And I've been on Zoom calls with him for like 90 hours this week. So happy to see him again. Alan Peisner has not changed his sweatshirt in 4 days, by the way. I love it. Alan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is laundry mandatory during this time of?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Really? We still have to take showers?
Yes.
Cleanliness is next to godliness in my book.
Oh, okay.
Maybe, Alan, we may be asking the question, are you going to tell the same jokes you did in the last Zoom call that we had on this one too?
No.
Just kidding.
He is.
No, but I think it's important to say fuck Bill Schuette.
Oh my.
Okay, that's right. That's right. And as we
I'm
move
glad
around,
you mentioned that because Jim forgot to give his sentiments to old Shooty.
I think Jim was thinking about another politician he wanted to say that to, but he hit his lip. That's what I'm guessing. Nevertheless, but what do I know? What do I know?
I don't know. What do I know?
Remember, we have he's got a very blank background, and his expression on his face is uncertain right now. But I do want to say I'm glad that he's here. He's prolific in his activism. He's the founder of the Cannabis Chronicles and the Michigan marijuana development industries. What just send me a thing? I know him as Big Daddy. Black people know him as Rick Thompson. Please welcome Rick Thompson.
Did you say black people know him as Rick Thompson? Is that what you said?
I think they said Big Daddy.
Okay.
I know him as Big Daddy. He's known as Big Daddy. No, I don't know.
Be a best-selling author.
Yeah. In my mind. Yes. Thank you for the nice intro. Good job.
He also used to be the former news director of Planet Green Trees with a very special. We should get back to that sometime. Well,
we should. I have to get administrator permission so that I can download the videos afterwards and cut the sections up. Right.
All right. Then we have, of course, Jamie Lowell, the person responsible for everything, and activist. Just name it. He's responsible for everything. He's currently working with Botanical Gardens and is going to take a position of expertise and to comment on the marketplace of cannabis and the business of cannabis. I think we're going to expect that out of him. Right, Jamie? Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Hello.
Right. Okay. Talkative as always.
True.
On today's show, we're going to be talking with former quarterback of the Detroit Lions, Eric Hipple. Eric Hipple.
Boom.
He might be my favorite quarterback of all time in the Lions. Seriously.
I'm glad that you said that because it's important that we have some people that have a deep interest in sports while we're doing this. I'm hoping to cover a number of topics with him, catch up with what he's into lately, and also
yeah, he's involved in some good things right now and has been for a few years. A lot of good things, but we'll get into it.
And one of which is the recent development of the collective bargaining agreement between players and the league in terms of the marijuana policy or cannabis policy. Think of a number of different football players who have careers went sideways because of their desires to want to neutralize their cannabinoid systems within their human system and being penalized for it by the NFL. And we're going to talk about that and some other things that, and he's, of course, is a life coach these days, and we'll give some advice, I think, for people that care to or listening, or even they can pass along, but people that may be struggling with mental health issues or whatnot. He's very prolific in that regard. So the topics so he's our guest. He's calling at 8:30. It's currently 8:10. The topics we intend to cover, and I'm going to tease these right now, are: one, amid a pandemic, Michigan pot shop see a boost in sales after the stimulus checks on or about 4/20. Topic two, Americans think, we've recycled some of these from last week that we didn't get to. Number two, Americans think cannabis is safer than alcohol, but social stigmas remain.
Still there.
Topic three is sweeping Weedmaps subpoenas underscores the U.S. government's continued scrutiny of the marijuana industry. In topic four, can Michigan marijuana patients, advocates, and doctors get some telemedicine approval? What's the story about that? We can touch on that if we can. Steve Miller is going to be back with his, we didn't officially name it, but he's going to be doing
the Cannabis Entertainment Corner. It is officially named.
Cannabis.
Not a CEC, not to be confused with CCE, the criminal charge.
Okay, very good. It's just a
simple CEC Cannabis Entertainment Corner because your entertainment options are so much more entertaining with cannabis.
Of course, not just movies are going to be reviewed, and also famous actors that are not very talented. A discussion. Jamie I was on a Zoom with him earlier. He was trying to start up with me early about some arguments he's going to put forth as well. But and then if we have time for it, I'm going to describe why many of you may believe that Bob Dylan's best album is Blood on the Tracks. I'm going to make the argument that Slow Train Coming is one of his best albums.
All right.
Topic one: amid the pandemic, Michigan pot shops see boosting sales after stimulus checks in 420 on or about 420. Now, there's a lot of things going on in this headline, and of course, I want to get to the article here. And Jamie, I want to defer to you, and Rick, of course. You guys have been on the trail, the beat, so to speak, and speak to some of this from the industry side and whatnot. But of course, Michigan licensed facilities were deemed essential businesses during this shutdown of the coronavirus pandemic. And many of the facilities have been doing curbside pickup, where you don't have to go in, but actually come to your car and drop it off. Some deliveries as well. And of course, during this, there was the stimulus check that went out from the government. So the combination of those things saw the federal government sending money to people in need, and other things that they would have purchased when they went to an essential business. They purchased cannabis, and we should all revel in that, because even though we laugh of how could marijuana be an essential business these days, after just a couple of years ago they were felonizing people with it, the bigger laugh is that the federal government sent this check and it's being used to purchase lawful cannabis in the state of Michigan. Rather
that's great.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like the federal government sent the checks to the provisioning centers.
Right. Keeping them in business. But anyway, so Jamie, you of course are involved with botanical gardens up in Taos. What is your take on? Did I miss that?
Botanical company.
Botanical company. All right, fine. No one's giving me notes. I'm doing all my plate. I got a lot of things going. So, but I just to get Rick to laugh. I'm glad to see it. So what's going on? What's going on, Jimmy? Why are the Michigan pot shops doing so well? How can you explain this?
Well, I mean, there's a few different factors. I know the headline of what you read off implies that people are hanging out at home. Cannabis is one of the businesses that it's out there, is up and running. They're getting extra money, from the government and spending it at the dispensaries. There's probably some of that going on. But also, not too long ago, sales have increased up there. But we also added on the ability, to be licensed under the MRTMA and to sell to people 21 and over for personal use, and not just in the medical program. So there's a few things that things are picking up, I think, for us up there. But that probably is a component. It seems to make sense to me. And good.
Certainly. And it makes a lot of sense. The headline doesn't actually refer to so much medical, and they refer to pot shops. Usually we would take offense to the use of the word pot for medical. And it's still in the headlines here. And it implies, I think, recreational. Rick, what are your thoughts on this? I mean,
the industry was really going up before the crisis, though, Michael, right? I mean, the number of centers being open was up. The number of pounds being produced was up. As Jamie mentioned, some of those places that had been previously restricted to only medical then got the ability to do recreational. So we were already on a pretty steep upward slope. So although COVID may have changed our trajectory a little bit, it didn't really stop that upward slope. And the reason it didn't is because of the decisions made by the government to allow it as a recreational, as a essential business, but also to expand their offerings to allow curbside pickup, to allow delivery in places where it wasn't previously available. So the government expanded the opportunities and the industry filled those opportunities. And then, of course, let's not forget the real reason that it's successful is because there's just a huge demand for cannabis on behalf of Michigan citizens. We've said it for decades, and this show has been, really proof pudding of that whole point, is that folks just love the cannabis. Give it to them.
I love it.
Give the people what they want. It's like our circus.
It's interesting that all these lined up. So 420 is the
Isn't that funny?
but that just happened to be the day that the checks went out, and some Michigan residents saw this $1,200 stimulus check. Then
I would just like to say I was quite
Put it to
stimulated.
good use.
It was weed money. Let's be honest. It was cannabis money.
They put it to good use.
I was much more stimulated than Jamie.
some of the stores were interviewed here.
You were, Jim. Yes, you were, as was I.
As the customers are maintaining, they're among the first week
stimulated
of Hipple, which is March 16th.
I'll get it on the break.
There's 13.7 million worth of medical and recreational cannabis. Then from April 13th to April 19th, when the stimulus checks dropped in the middle of the week, sales rose to 15.9 million. That's per week? Is that what they're intimating here, Jamie? You guys are, your company's making $13.7 million now, or $15 million a week?
That is a weekly report typically that the MRA puts out, yeah.
For Jamie's business?
Oh, probably the 13 million for just Jamie's business? Right, no, that's
per day up there. East Dallas, our little store does $13 million.
internal document.
We're surprised.
You guys are rocking it.
But,
Yeah, you guys are really rocking it. You better put your location services off.
And what we're talking about is that's per week. That was, I was joking, but that's per week we're talking about. So we're talking about 65 million, approximately 64 million a month. So yeah, so Rick, your point was that even before that, 13.7 million a week at the state level, I mean, all encompassed is a lot more revenue than, say, the previous year. It seems like things are moving along now. Okay, so that's the point here, that the sale, the numbers here are rather remarkable, I guess. Here it says in the first 3 months of the legal recreational market sales in Michigan, from December to February 29th, retail sold more than 31 million. And the industry that was just getting its feet wet and disrupted many shops. So not everyone was doing great, but then after the stimulus came out, it seemed to go up. So
well, there were a lot of places that were negatively affected by the coronavirus isolation. We've seen a lot of places, I'm sure Jamie can talk about it, where employees, you had to drop half your employees because you just don't need as much interior staff if you're doing curbside. So there's, there were some hiccups, there's no question. The remarkable thing is, despite all of those negative driving forces on the market was still on an upward trend. When the COVID crisis is released, we are just going to shoot up like the cork out of the bathtub.
And it's been pretty incredible how the cannabis industry has adapted. I mean, you watch other industries and how they've adapted to this crisis, and how a lot of these businesses are failing and complaining that they're so restricted. And cannabis businesses found a way, and they got it done.
I got a reason for that, Jim, a theory.
Oh, yeah?
Because people in the cannabis business have been hiding for years. And you're always trying to do stuff like you're in a crisis, right? Because you don't want to get caught. Yeah. So for the people who've been involved in it all these years as it's been illegal and kind of hiding and running and scurrying, fearing from getting in trouble, they can adapt easily, especially now that they can sell in the open and then have a regular business, licensed business. And but they've developed that ability to adapt from years of being illegal. So now that it's legal and they run into a crisis situation, they just know how to adapt. It's just probably second nature to them, would be my guess. That's my theory.
A good theory.
Sure makes sense. Well, I participated in the Benzinga podcast today, and they talked about long-term consequences for the industry. Remember that in 2019, last year, a lot of investment in resources dried up. Canadian and American sources of investment capital were gone away. People lost confidence in the cannabis industry. Folks were having to do things like mergers and acquisitions or lease buyback programs in order to maintain liquidity. The problem is that those payments are still required. And if there's a big hiccup in their income stream because of COVID, that could cause some real problems for some of those companies that leveraged very deeply last year. And it's difficult to tell who those folks are. And it's also difficult to tell when those consequences may come down. We may not see, this ripple effect actually take hold on some of the industry players until 6 to 12 months down the road. But this quarter or half a year of depressed sales for some places could mean the difference between being in business and not being in business.
Certainly. Jim said he's comparing it to some of the other entities, businesses that were struggling. Jim, what do you mean by that? How did they really adapt? I mean, obviously they're moving their websites and availability to an online service, but tell me something remarkable that they did, or do they just
there is nothing really remarkable. It's not rocket science. They found a path and they walked it, and immediately adapting to curbside service, facilitating orders, whether it be via internet or telephone, and immediately adapting. And I didn't really see a whole lot of other businesses that were able to accomplish it, even after the restrictions were lifted by the governor allowing for curbside and delivery service. What I did see and hear was a lot of business owners complaining that it wouldn't be possible for them, that they could not adapt, that they couldn't bring on online ordering, and as a result would be unable to implement something like a curbside delivery service. But what I saw and what I continue to see, even in other industries, is these people that are really driven and a little bit scrappy and are willing to go the extra mile, are figuring out a way. I mean, I see smoke shops nearby that have set up tables right outside their door, and they're taking orders live right there so that people don't have to enter the store. And I see other stores getting creative in that regard. But I think the thing that was interesting about the cannabis industry is it was immediate and it was proactive. It was barely even a hiccup.
Loss of money will drive people to innovation. I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. Lost money is the kick in the ass you need to adjust your business model to the circumstances.
I think Steve's right, though, too. We've had to change so often and adapt to new conditions a lot along this journey, even from the MMFLA through now. So it was
totally valid.
One thing that Curbside has done is demonstrate a really preferred and efficient way for some people to get their cannabis, and even after all this is over, it would make sense to be able to have that as an option. We would like to have longer and better conversations with some people for sure, because especially if they're new to trying out cannabis for health reasons or whatever their reason is, but we're restricted to shorter times of dealing with new customers under these circumstances, and that kind of goes away. But for many people, it's a really efficient and safe way of conducting business. So I know that on Friday, Alan and some others are going to be in conversation with Andrew Brisboe, and that's one of the questions that's going to come up.
Yeah, in addition to curbside, it'd be nice to have those drive-up window capabilities that a lot of stores have. And I just want to add something to what Jim Powers said about the adaptability of this business and how quickly they adapt to the COVID crisis. And to point out that was all done without any federal money, that these businesses are barred from getting any of the federal small business loans.
The Catholic Church being one of them. Recipients of much of that PPP.
Separation of church and state much?
PPP, PPE, whatever they call it. These businesses were barred, but they've remained open and prospered without the federal government's help. And it just goes to show you that it's the #1 cash crop in the United States.
We've knocked down some old term bigotries against cannabis too, by showing how efficient curbside ordering can be, how non-threatening delivery services can be. We've taken some of those things that they traditionally complained about regarding our industry and kind of turned it on their head. So in this instance, our industry is, I think, coming out of this whole conflict smelling like a rose. We may even get telemedicine out of it. I know that's one of your topics later, Michael. There's no reason we can't do certifications.
Zero reason.
None.
In fact, they should be having less and less people go to the doctor's office. Do the televisit first. Keep, then that way keeps germs down at the doctor's office, right? I mean, you can talk to the doctor face to face like this, give them your symptoms.
You guys,
I mean, if they're questioning something, they'll tell you, well, I need you to come in so I can physically examine you. Yep. I mean, we can use common sense in all this.
And we use telemedicine for so much these days. I mean, I can't even recall the last time I went to a doctor. Erin had an issue with her hand a couple of weeks ago, and it's as easy getting on the phone, getting a doctor on the phone, and in 5 minutes you've got whatever you need.
Yeah.
The fact that we are excluded statutorily from doing this is ridiculous.
A lot of proctologists are offering their services this way.
That's right. Just need bright light. That's all.
Jamie just wants to drive by, stick his ass out the window, and get serviced by the proctologist.
Yeah, wow. Is that an extra charge? Because,
proctology by telemedicine really stimulates Jamie.
All right, we have, as you can see,
Eric Hipple does not look amused, actually. No.
Is this the best time for a segue to our guest, Michael?
We may want to segue to a break and then to the
program about marijuana.
Proctologist to an honored guest. I mean, wow. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I just put my hands underneath the center. I'm there.
That's right.
463 on a slow train coming. And our guest is in the queue, Eric Hipple. We're going to take a quick break and then come back and learn everything we can about him.
Excellent.
We'll be right back. Eric, thanks. We'll be right back. We can we'll drop out here and get on the.
I can cough again.
All right, we're off to a good start, I think.
Are we out, fellas?
Are we on break?
Yeah. Tommy, are we out?
Negative.
Yeah.
Take us out. Yeah.
Hey, we'll be right back.
I guess
Now we're out.
Hey.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
It's time for Planet Green.
We have launched.
We've completely launched. We've started the show, and it is Planet Green Trees. We're about to embark 2 hours of medical marijuana and marijuana reform in Michigan.
We're traveling through a dimension both of sound and ideas. We're at a place where the mind can comprehend and devise a wireless transmitter. Measure time and light. Astonishing? Perhaps. But you can find it in a place that's known as...
Attention, ladies and gentlemen. The Planet Green Trees show is underway with your host, the Planet Green Trees show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
I am Earl from G3 Cannabis Therapy Network, and you are watching Planet Green Trees, the original and #1 podcast in Michigan for all things cannabis and legal news.
Now's the time to pull it out.
Okay, so our next guest, our next speaker is Anquinette Sarfo. Everybody knows her as Q, of course. Many of us welcomed her into our homes for many years. She was the Channel 2 Fox News newscaster in the morning. I watched her for years. I felt like she was a friend before I even knew her. Following her MS diagnosis, she's led a very public campaign advocating for the use of medical marijuana in the treatment of MS. And she's a tireless leader, and she's one of the people that we can really thank for the passage of Prop 1. So here we go, my friend Q. Unmute your mic, Q.
Okay, here we go. Is that better? Take 2? All right, perfect. Thank you, everybody. Happy Digital Hash Bash, everybody, and thank you for joining the party from home. Today, while we celebrate legalization and take a puff of appreciation for the men and women who spent the last 50 years getting us to this moment, we must recognize that their work and our work is far from finished. A few months ago, I had a multiple sclerosis relapse, and I passed out and possibly had a seizure. I want to thank the Farmington Hills Fire Department and the EMS workers who helped me that day. My doctor later prescribed me a medication, one that costs $1,200 a month, and that is with insurance. So guess what? That prescription is still at the pharmacy. But what my doctor didn't tell me is that some patients who are having issues such as mine were seeing results with cannabis, which would cost me about $100 a month if I went with an option like this, which is full extract cannabis oil. He couldn't tell me that even if that was too expensive, I could just grow it myself like this. This is Michigan grown hemp, and I can make the extract myself. My doctor can't give me and patients like me all of their options. Cannabis education is still being censored in the medical community. We must end this, and we really have to put the medical back in medical marijuana. I treat my mother's diabetes and arthritis with cannabis, and it is working. Yet she and so many patients like her, elderly patients, are terrified to tell their doctors. How is this healthcare? It's not. And we can't stop with cannabis. Legalization actually starts with cannabis. This magic mushroom also grows naturally. Cultures have used them safely for centuries. Researchers have been studying them for conditions like depression, Alzheimer's disease, and addiction for decades, but they remain illegal. Why? It is time for us to decriminalize nature. DNA2.org is working on that, so please, please consider joining and supporting their efforts. And finally, let's not forget that people are still in jail and in prison for nonviolent marijuana offenses, and those who are released live in the shadow of records that should have been expunged by now. Michigan lost a champion in the expungement fight with the death of Representative Isaac Robinson last month from coronavirus. We have to fill the void that he left and finally get expungement law passed in Michigan and across the country. So hey, let's celebrate today and let's get back at it tomorrow. You can always find me on social media at Channel Q, and I'm really looking forward to letting you guys know about something I'm unveiling on 420. So I hope to see you then, and until then, let me grab my puff. Puff, puff, don't pass. Stay safe by staying at home, and I'll see you soon. Back to you guys, the Hash Bash crew, and thank you so much for doing this. This is fun, and the parking is so much better.
Oh, that's so awesome, Q. Thank you.
I wish there was thunderous applause. You deserve it.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Rick, why don't you tee up our next speaker?
Next year, this will be 10 times as big. Post your photo. Next thing, if you got a joint, now's the time to pull it out.
Bill Schuette led the charge against medical marijuana, and even after the will of the voters was decided and the support was enormous, he still continued to fight against the will of the voters, keeping patients from the medicine that they need. So I think it's important that we all speak up on what we think about this initiative. But when the voters have their say, their will must stand.
Here's Michael Komorn with more Planet Green Trees.
You should say it like that.
Alrighty, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. You're listening to Planet Green Trees, episode number 463. I'm your host, Michael Komorn, and we have our community entertainment, and we're joined by a special guest that I'm very excited to have on. His name is Eric Hipple. Many know him as the quarterback of the Detroit Lions in a special era. And just so, for those of you that don't know, Eric, of course, played quarterback for the Detroit Lions. He's was drafted the 4th round, pick number 85 in 1980 draft. In a spectacular game, I think, that year against the Chicago Bears. Memorable, 5 touchdowns, crazy comeback win. Me and Steve Miller, who's also on this call, we're discussing that as this how Eric kind of, Gary Danielson was the franchise player, and Eric stepped in this game, and I don't think they ever
lit it up. He lit it up.
Lit it up.
I did as a picture back here. No, anyway, so it was a great time. We actually had a great team. Billy Sims was our #1 draft choice that year. I came in. Billy and I were in the same draft, and he was. We had some talent, man. It was really, really good year. That was 1980, and then I replaced Gary in 81 with that big Chicago Monday night game.
Yes.
And then went on and became the starter after that, and few battles back and forth, but we went to the playoffs a couple times. Won the division one year. So
you're my favorite all-time Lions player. Swear to God.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Good memories of watching you play back when I was a kid. So. Yeah.
You weren't one of those guys that sat in the stands and booed?
No, I just loved you guys. That was all.
Well, I always loved Thanksgiving Day. That was like my favorite time to play. I always played really well.
I love those games. Just watching the Thanksgiving Day. It's what you look forward to on Thanksgiving, right? That
it was our Super Bowl because it was a national game.
Right.
Back then you didn't have many national games; they were all regional. But anyway,
right. So
here I am. Yeah.
Eric played 10 seasons in the NFL. I have a distinct memory of being at I think it was the 80 or 81 season, I think. Wait, was that possible? Let me think. What year was the one where they went 8-0 or 9-0 out of the gates? And
that was Billy Sims.
Spider-Man Allen.
Yeah.
That's right. You guys
out of the game. I think that was 1980.
Yeah. And the Queen changed another one bites the dust.
Oh man, did that come back and bite us?
Dude. As soon as that happened.
Had that 45.
That ended it, didn't it?
Soul, Spider-Man, Allen, and those guys went and made that tape, For that on in, you might just make big old targets on us and say, here we are. Take us out.
That's exactly what happened, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, man. That's you piss off other teams when you do stuff like that, right? And so instead of kind of laying low and kind of sneaking there. No battery. Oh, jeez. There you go.
But that was fun. That was all fun. I mean, anytime you have a Queen song that's tailored to you, that's really cool.
Yeah. It was cool. That was a great era. Yeah, as I said.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we went through 2 strikes. We went through the one in it was 82 and then the one in 87. And a lot of the stuff that we were asking for back then, they've gotten 10 times fold, nowadays. And the CBA they just signed again changed a lot of things, that the players are gonna be able to do.
That's right. That strike in the 80s, didn't they have a bunch of guys just come in and just start playing? It was
no, that was the walkout one. That was 87 when they did that, and they brought a bunch of guys in.
Yeah.
They learned really quick that guys would try and come back in really fast. Now that was the replacement era, the 87. In fact, a couple of guys really did really well in that, and Eric Kramer was one of them. Kramer was one of those guys that came in, and he ended up sticking with the league it went on, the great things afterwards. And
Didn't they make a movie about that called The Replacements?
They did. Mark Wahlberg, I think, was it Mark? Was it? No, he was. That was the one from
Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves was in it.
That's right. Yeah. The Replacements. Yeah, that wasn't a great time for us. It was. We had a meeting, because we had a union at the time. Now it's an association, but they had a meeting and said, what are we going to do to stop these, the lockouts? And we had made agreements, I think, with the Teamsters, I think it was at the time, right?
Yeah.
And they showed up with these big lead balls with spikes in them. We'll take care of it for you. We'll just throw these underneath the tires of the buses as they come in. No.
Yeah, those guys mean
little blast and actually gets somebody injured. How is that going to look? It was crazy.
Yeah. Back in the 80s, the unions meant business.
They did.
I lived in Flint when the plants started shutting down, and I remember incidents up in Flint where if you drove a Toyota through Flint and you stopped at a stop sign, there was people coming out of the woodwork with bats, beating on cars and destroying foreign cars and stuff. It's crazy.
In all the auto plant parking lots, you couldn't bring a Toyota or a Honda vehicle in there and walk out of it without it being spray painted or have the windows busted.
A lot of people lost jobs up there at that time. And plants shut down, and kids I went to school with who would be getting their job at GM because their dad or their brother was getting them in because that's just how it went. They weren't getting a job anymore out of high school.
Well, I graduated in 1983, and one of the things we in Flint looked toward was the Lions as a way to distract ourselves from some of the things that were going on around here. Sports are the great connector between communities. You can not know anything about a person, but if they've got a Lions jacket on, when you walk up to them, you've got something to talk about.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right, Eric, let me ask you this. You were talking about...
Don't plug this in. Because my battery's going dead. I'm sorry, Michael. Hang on a second. See if check that plug. My battery's flashed. I'm sorry. Okay, technical.
All right. Sorry. So you were talking about the walkouts during that time, the strikes and the collective bargaining agreement. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show. And you're familiar with all that. Were you involved with some of the management from the players' side, Eric, back then? Were you representing the team? I know that each team had like a player.
Each team had a player rep and then an alternative. And during that time, a lot of guys didn't want to be that rep because when things came out of it, they found themselves getting cut. And so there was a lot of battles going back and forth. It was completely different than it is today. And I say that because there's such an adversary position back then that today there really isn't an adversary position. They're both, since they share revenues, which they didn't back then, but since they share revenues, both sides are trying to maximize the potential, maximize the income. And so they really work together. They still protect, certain issues, but the union or the Players Association and the league actually really works together on a lot of the stuff. And just the chagrin of some of the former, some of the older guys are saying, oh, we're not getting our stuff. But this last CBA, they made some adjustments, and I think they did it quickly, and it went through pretty smooth. And I think it's because of a lot of coordinated efforts.
Well, one of the things, obviously, I want to ask you about the policy about drug testing. But before I ask you about that, that was obviously something that was negotiated in a way that was, potentially negative to the player if they were to use cannabis. But what were put that one aside for a second, what are the other major issues at that time that would cause a walkout that are no longer, that we've moved on past and we're into other issues? What were some of the major issues? Was revenue sharing one of them at the time, or was it, or some of the other ones that were major?
The biggest thing was free agency. At the time, you couldn't, to be a free agent meant that, I can become a free agent, but if I go to another team, the other team who took me would have to compensate the team I left, right? And so if you try to, beat the system by saying, okay, I don't want to play for that much and give me a bonus, the original team still had the first right of refusal so they could match your contract. So you didn't have free agency. It was kind of a shell, of having free agency. So nobody moved. And that's why you had some of these teams that they could build on what they had. And you saw, and so free agency was a big thing because of the money issues and kept down. Not until actually in the 90s, the early 90s.
Wasn't Herschel Walker like the first free agent that there was like a big trade. I don't know. There's some monumental trade or something like that.
The only thing that helped us at the time was because some of these other, the USFL started up and, the other leagues have it up. So it gave some sort of competition, even though they weren't real competition, but it was enough to make some of these really big contracts. Like Steve Young had a huge contract. Herschel Walker had a huge contract. So these guys had huge contracts because of the competition. Other than that, nothing like that happened. Not until actually in the early 90s when we actually disbanded the union, and a couple of guys, Reggie White sued the league on antitrust law. And that meant the draft would go away. That meant no more shared revenues. And so that's really when it came together and they started working together and they brought the union back in and they started giving like 50% for 9% of the revenues to the players. And that's when you saw these huge contracts take off and not until they finally got the cap realized and started putting things back together again. But that was the biggest change.
And I want to talk about the cannabis in a second, but one of the other ones that stood out at me was, and you referred to it, the older play, like some of the other leagues take better care of their older players. The NFL, I'm going to guess, was the worst of the three, maybe not as bad as hockey. I don't know it that well, but I read in some of the collective bargaining agreement this last go around that there was some like blanket for retired athletes that had played football for a certain time in the league and they were going to get some retirement. Is that right? Was that like some of that retired 30 years ago, for example, 20 years ago, that has no pension of any kind now has a pension or something like that? Can you explain that a little?
Yeah, that applied. I want to say that like over 200 guys were affected by that. If you were you only made 3 years in the league and it took 4 years to get vested, you didn't get a pension, right? And so maybe it's more than 200, maybe it's like 2,000 something. The guys were affected by that. But so by making that change, just by dropping it down, they will now get a pension. The other thing is they increased the pension. The last collective bargaining agreement, they did put a thing in called a legacy, trying to get some money to the older guys that never received any of the benefits that the 90s got, right? So that meant, no extended health care. There was no annuity that would kick in at age 35. There was no line of duty pay. I mean, all that stuff, none of that was existing. So really the older players, that played, pre-90s were holding the bag with nothing. And so that was really a big fight became afterwards and trying to catch that up. So some of those changes were made, recognizing, giving some of those programs long-term care availability. What the biggest thing that's going to happen, I think, is going to be really interesting to see. But one of the biggest problems is, not having, healthcare. And so they realize it's going to be too expensive to cover everybody's former players' premiums. And so what they did do is they started this hospital system. So all 32 teams, the hospitals that they use for their players will become, I don't want to say a VA system, but will become a system to where guys can go in and get free care, free health care if they can just go to the hospital. So that's a good thing, so that opens up, some care for those guys.
Nice. Yeah. So we had talked a couple years ago. First of all, let me ask this. Do the changes that have been made to the football this year bring the NFL in line with how the other professional sporting leagues treat their retired players or after ends their professional career? Where does the NFL stand as far as you view it with the NBA and Major League Baseball and hockey? I know the football players have more players, more people, more personnel to account for, so that's something, but they also probably make more money, right? There's bigger revenue sharing and probably the most popular of the professional sports, I'm guessing, I don't know. But how does the NFL stand in your view compared to how the other professional organizations treat their retired players?
It still lags behind, but you brought up a couple of key points, which are, there's 20,000, former players that are out there, and so I don't know how many, former players are out there and how many basketball players, but you got smaller teams, they've got larger contracts, they've got guaranteed contracts, which is a big deal. We don't have guaranteed contracts. The guys who sign the top 2-3% of guys that sign these huge contracts because they give it to them in a bonus. So that's money's guaranteed. So a $20 million bonus would be guaranteed, but their contracts aren't guaranteed. So that means if I get cut, I've got a 10-year contract and I get cut after the second year, I don't receive any of that money. And so that's a big deal because the other sports do have guaranteed contracts. It makes it a little harder for them to move somebody. And I think you're starting to see baseball really react to that. and start really going to short-term contracts, where in the past they've had long-term contracts trying to tie people up.
I'm kind of curious, and if it's asking too much. So in 1980, when you were drafted, 80-81, Billy Simmons was probably a 1-2 pick. Did he win he won the Heisman, I think, or whatever? Like, what does his contract look like 1980, 81, whenever, compared to the Heisman guy that's going to be picked this year or last year? You know, what's that looking like? Explain that. You know, how far have we come since then, since the 80s?
Well, I think at one point in time, Billy might have topped $1 million, right? Heisman Trophy winner, might have topped $1 million.
You mean total career earnings or contract for the year?
That would have been for a year. I think he finally got to the point where he got $1 million, but they also tied him up for long distance. In other words, so that was partly bonus, and it wasn't just plain salary. At 89, when we drafted Barry Sanders in 89, just before we drafted him, I was the highest paid Lion, and that was at 400 grand with I signed a bonus, so make it $500,000 basically was and that was back in 89. It's a lot of money back then, but you know, comparatively today, not much, and especially since, you know, a quarterback today, you know, just standing on the bench, you know, is making, you know, $1 million plus. But you know, that's then, and that's how things change. The biggest thing is we fought really hard to get these changes made, right? So we sacrificed a lot back then. When it did change, it changed drastically. So these younger guys who are now getting the windfall of this, they lose sight sometimes, and who wouldn't? I mean, you know, you're only in the game for like 3 years, 3.5 years tops, right? You know, there's some long-term guys like Brady, you know, that just last everybody. But so it's hard for them to look back and see what the game was like. And so that's an education process. And that education process, you know, sometimes takes time to come around. And it also takes some media. It takes a push from previous players, some of the wrongs that were done. The head injury thing was huge. To also, you know, to have the league look at it in a different point of view of wanting to take care of guys, you know, after the game and not just be there for the game. And that was it. So that's made a lot of changes. I think the head injury, the concussion lawsuit, all that stuff really opened up a lot of eyes, the public as well. They put a lot of pressure on the NFL to take care of the guys.
All right, so we're finally on the next topic here, which I was excited. And when I read this agreement, I thought of you immediately because we'd had a conversation a few years ago, and I think there's some other football players. This may have been you or the group that you were running with some retired players, and we were talking about cannabis in the NFL. Of course, the issues with the NFL and the treatment of pain, chronic pain during the career, after the career, and the use of opioids has caused, you know, it probably parallels the NFL, what it's done to our society, if not worse. I don't know if it's the same, but clearly as that issue of treatment of pain in our society brought about this opioid addiction and problem across the country, many in the NFL have had the same issues, which have led to other ancillary issues, or they've had other ancillary issues which are exacerbated by the, you know, sole treatment. And we discussed at some time the, you know, use of cannabis to treat pain. Now, the discussion at that time a couple of years ago was that, you know, and it may have been you, someone said, hey, Komorn, you know, there's so much money that transfers on the week, on Sundays and Mondays through Vegas. And the NFL is so ideally predictable, and there's so much confidence in its predictability that the line is, there's a lot of confidence in the line week after week. And if you threw into the mix that the players could smoke cannabis at any time, it created a variable that would offset the number, the confidence in the line, so to speak. And that would reduce the gambling, and that would reduce the money. And therefore, the NFL was never going to change their policy. Or that was the thought at the time. I may be over-exaggerating to make the point. But sure enough, a couple years later, the NBA will reduce the testing period from 4 months to the 2 weeks at the start of the training camp. And a new threshold for positive tests will also be in place, raising the allowed amount of THC from 35 nanograms to 150 nanograms. I mean, 150 nanograms arguably can be right after someone takes a hit on a joint, right? And walk in and drop and have 150 nanograms. So it's almost like a no policy. It's almost as if they're not punishing, and it's got to be something totally crazy in these numbers in order for it to impact the player. This is remarkable to me. I could think of the other players in the history, like Ricky Williams. I mean, his whole career was about his battle with cannabis. I'm sure there's others as well. What are your thoughts on this? What happened? How did this change so dramatically, if at all?
Well, I think several things happened. One is the neuro. Everybody's looking for a neuroprotective, protectant. So CBD oil, floated to the top because of the neuroprotectant for, protecting the brain, possibly against concussion, or helping a layer of protection anyway. But also pain issues, inflammation issues. Those things have always been there. The thing is, in the past, the way this is history. The way that we treated those things were with the legal means, which were here's a prescription, or here's alcohol. And so there's alcohol around the culture of the league was huge. You drink on the plane, you drink, on the night before the game, you drink, you drink after the game, you drink after practice. I mean, so there was a lot of that was there, right? So it's had its own issues, but it was legal. Okay. And so as long as the federal portion was there, and I don't think it was so much trying to keep people away from cannabis per se because of the drug that it is, because it was illegal still federally. They were afraid of somebody getting caught up legally with the wrong person, and then having that being held against them. Hey, I can turn you in, and you lose you're going to lose your job. And so I want you not to catch the big play. So it's always been about gambling in that area. I mean, somebody gets hooked on drugs, back then they used to test a lot for heroin and everything else, early, those opiates they test for. And they're looking for, if this guy's got a problem, the chance of him getting indebted to somebody could be pretty large. And if that happens, then gambling pops in again. And so a lot of it has an underbelly of, are you susceptible to throwing a game? Are you going to be predictable? Are going to be the same person playing that you before? Because there's a lot of money, as we said, that change hands. I mean, let's face it. I mean, gambling is huge, right, on the NFL and on sports altogether. And so that was kind of the underlying theme. I think with the lessening of in states and lessening of that, then it became less of an idea that somebody's really going to get kind of rolled up in trouble with it. But they still do test, the 2 weeks. What they're really looking for, can somebody abstain for a couple of weeks? You know what I mean? Because if they can't, maybe they do have a problem. And so we'll look into it, or at least we got them on our radar in case we start seeing performances drop off. And so maybe we can then have a reason why we can get him to treatment if he needs it. But I think that was the major thing, and the opiate thing that with guys end up addicted, guys end up health wise, it's terrible for your gut, it's got tolerance issues to it. And so I think that crashing wave came down and said hey, we have to accept this, that culturally speaking, this is the new drug and the new relaxation, but it's also pain and inflammation acceptable and helps in a lot of ways.
Let me ask you a question. I didn't catch this. Does it matter if the player is a medical marijuana patient? For example, Michigan started with severe and chronic pain. Now it's severe pain or just chronic pain as a condition by which doctor would make a recommendation to use cannabis, get a card registered through the state, privileged information. Is that something that matters to the NFL, or is that not? You know what I mean? If we're talking about
and I don't think it does. I think they're over the umbrella that they look at is the federal laws, right? And so they're trying to be compliant, not be because they cross states, they cross lines, this is a national deal. That's they try and remain compliant. That no, we're not saying you can freely use. If you use, we're just not going to enforce. We're just not going to enforce, punishment there to it, right? So I think that's the main thing.
Well, it's you were mentioning the neuroprotectant and some of the other medicinal values. I couldn't help but I'm sure everyone on this call, because we're all advocates and have been, protesting the illegality of cannabis. But the United States government since 2003, maybe even 1972, there's a patent 6630507 that the federal government has, National Institute of Science declaring it as a neuroprotectant. The plant is a neuroprotectant, and that was back then, and
yeah,
it's an amazing reality when you think about it. The government has been making it illegal, and it's of course been a medicine that they know, despite its continued classification as a Schedule 1. It is rather absurd. What has been the fallout? I know, there's a lot of people that didn't love this collective bargaining agreement. There was mixed reactions. I think they said, what's the downside that a lot of people have been discussing, and is the cannabis part of that discussion?
I don't know at that level, but really most of the complaints that I heard was how it was done. It was done quickly. It was done without. It was kind of like shoved down the throats of the players, to vote on and do it really quickly. So they felt like it really was a collective bargain. It was an agreement that was made without the bargaining part. But as I said, the Players Association and the league, they pretty much work in concert, together. Even their help foundations that operates, out of the league, that also operate out of the Players Association, they sit on each other's boards, and they work together, to try and get to help the player the best they can, when they're in need. And this is, after you left the game. But I mean, so they pretty much, so the money that goes into that is pretty much shared. The trust, which helps players and also does the brain and body scans and all that kind of stuff like that, is also shared revenue that the league and the PA share, with the trust. And so it really is taking a lot of that out of it. I mean, quite frankly, if you think about it, if you get 50% of the revenues and I get 50% of the revenues, you and I are going to be a lot more concerned about maximizing that than we are about being divisive and saying, no, you're not giving me enough, or I want more of this and I want more of that. They'll do that, but the overall deal is, hey, maximize the profit. And so playing 16 to 18 games or 17 games, whatever, that's been on the list, and extending having the season but no bye weeks. And I mean, all that stuff they were talking about, they're trying to maximize the profits, and for a good reason.
Interesting. I know there's a lot of players that whose careers have been ruined because they couldn't test clean during that period of time, as I mentioned. I can't imagine what they're thinking now with this new policy. I did see some of the response was, whoever it was that's not happy about this, they were blaming the capitulation or the agreement for the cannabis as, over exaggerating a value that may have been a loss somewhere else. Some of the comment was like, you sold out a bunch of people so you could smoke some weed, kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, that's it's, but
well, not everybody, not everybody smokes weed, right? And and I mean, so and so you when it comes down to it, this league is completely different than it was back in 20 years ago. It's different than it was 10 years ago. It's been an evolution of change. You know what I mean? And so I think players today are more sophisticated in the fact that they have to deal with some of these larger issues because of the money that's been thrown. So they have to educate themselves. I think there's a more educated player that's out there. It's not just let's go out and play a rough, tough game and three downs in a cloud of dust. It's more of a cerebral game. And so I think you take that onto accounting to what is the drive, what do we want to have, and what do we need. I think the idea of the cannabis, the lessening of those, I think it's a good thing. There's a lot of players that would have to do alternate things or ruin their career if they didn't change the rules the way they are, the testing. So and it does have good effects to it. What thing I will emphasize though, that I'm glad they still keep a finger on, is they're worried about still addictive issues. They're worried about depression. They're worried about the mental health a lot more than they ever were in the past. It was all physical. That's it. Can you do the job? Can you do the job? now there's a lot more that goes into the mental health and behavioral health aspects of things. And part of that is well-being. And so I think if you're, it's a trade-off, alcohol use or opiate use to that, I think we can be smart enough to say, the use of opiates is the best thing in the world.
What about
Eric? I was going to ask you. I'd read that you do some work with the U of M and outreach and for different mental health and depression type of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I actually after I came out of my own transition, and then I lost a son, so I had we had a major mental health issue in our family to suicide, and I crashed and burned, and coming out of that, I was looking for answers, and I found myself at the University of Michigan, getting treatment myself. But then I became very outspoken, and they brought me in as an outreach coordinator, I guess, for doing outreach, and started putting programs together to educate and to do mental health, mental fitness, connection. Transition is a huge thing. And today we're looking at one of the biggest transitions ever when we come out of this thing, and how people are going to respond to it. What about the ones who lost, financially? What about the ones who don't got the jobs when they go back? Doctors and stuff that are going to have to take up telemedicine that maybe weren't used to it because they had their practice set. All that stuff is going to change. It's huge transition. How that affects us, in our mental health was big. So I spent 11 years with the University of Michigan, and then left there to a behavioral treatment facility where we were working with players and working with veterans as well. And then I've been on this track, even school programs, some of it sponsored by Mental Illness Resource Association, to which Michael knows, and then Be Nice campaign. So I've been in this world. I traveled with the U.S. The Naval Forces, so the Navy, for 10 years doing suicide prevention workshops, all over, ouch, get my hand, anyway, to all the bases and, overseas as well. And so, so it's always a changing thing, mental health and suicide's a huge deal. Cooping people up that might have trouble already isn't the greatest thing in the world, especially if you can't reach and get to a therapist and talk to somebody. Yeah.
Eric, did I hear you say that by allowing the cannabis use that many players have decreased their opiate use?
I think it's an alternative now, and especially with the way things, the knowledge and the laws now, it's really hard, for a person to continue opiate use, right? Yeah. So what would happen is, if I got hooked, during, I actually think it's probably hard to get hooked nowadays with the league. Not unless you've already got a predisposition for it, but I think the big abuses that are happening don't really happen that way anymore.
Right. Well, if I could just ask one quick follow up on that, because you said this cannabis then to save their careers, but the other problem that is traveling with it, when you go to another state, it may, number one, you're boarding a plane, so that's interstate traveling with the cannabis, which is illegal, and then who knows if it's legal in the state where we're going to play the game. So that presents a problem.
It does present a problem, but if you don't think that through social media and the web of connections we have today, that's not there when they land.
Okay, I guess, that's not a problem then.
Yeah.
How do they know it's not hemp?
Taking a break. You want to take a break? Okay, that's fine. And Amanda moved us on to the other topic, and Al kind of brought us back a second.
Did we tease the topics already? Or?
What's that?
Did we tease the topics?
We did at the beginning, and we're going to get.
We did.
Eric's going to put up with us for at least one more segment, I think. I hope. And if he can hang in there, we can talk more about his involvement. I want to hear what it is about resilience that can help those that are suffering, and the significance of that, and some of the other skill set that he may have taught and trained some of the military, law enforcement, schools that he passes to those groups. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit when we come back. If he'll still put up with us. Okay, fantastic. Let's go to a break then from the bunker over there. Listen to Planet Green Trees episode 463. We're calling it Slow Train Coming. We'll be right back.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today, michiganmedicalmarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. michiganmedicalmarijuana.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 2020 Digital Hash Bash broadcast, hosted by Jamie Lowell. Jamie, you're out there, aren't you?
I'm here, hosted by all of us. I'm not taking all the credit, that's for sure.
Nope. A whole big gang of us. I'd like to introduce our next guest speaker here. BDT Smoke Shop opened in 1973. They're the #1 head shop in the Southeast Michigan for more than a dozen years. This gentleman is the face of BDT Smoke Shop, but he's so much more, and I hope he gets a chance to explain that. Let me introduce Mr. Curtis Gore.
I hear a bit of an echo.
Hey, Curtis.
My intro was so good, he didn't feel the need to stay around to say anything. Awesome!
Well, unfortunately, I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes, we can, Curtis. Yay! Thank you.
Oh, boy. Poor internet connection, I think. All right. Just as we thought things were going well.
You're doing great. We can see you and hear.
I could hear the intro.
We can hear you and see you. Keep going.
Okay, wonderful. Well, it's a pleasure to be on our first ever virtual Hash Bash over Skype. This has been fantastic. I think it's time to have a little fun. Can you still see me?
Mm-hmm. So there you go.
We got something big going on in the background here. Kind of chilling things out here at the Hazel Park BDTs. Well, it's obviously been a tough time for all of us. But we're going to do our best getting through.
You know, Curtis, it's difficult to know what is an essential service and what isn't. How's BDTs doing with this whole situation? Are you an essential service? Are you able to service customers?
No, we are, all our stores are shut down right now. But fortunately, with our gas and chemical company, Bumblebee Gas and Extraction, we've been actually servicing the community by providing isopropyl alcohol and non-denatured alcohol and actually turning that into a sanitizer. And we're still
so awesome.
Curtis, we may have lost you. That's a shame. If you notice Curtis's background, those of us who can still see him on freeze frame, he's at the Marijuana Museum, which is existing in Hazel Park. Jamie Lowell's been there before. That happens to be a great rack of magazines and other memorabilia, not just from Cheech and Chong, but other remnants of the era. It's quite an impressive place, Jamie.
Yeah, we did a Jazz Cabbage Cafe broadcast from there.
Sure did.
Helped to show it off and had a really great lineup of people there participating.
Yeah. That hat he was wearing itself deserves a story. That was pretty awesome. And a fog machine for the Hash Bash show? That's great.
An important and historical farm crop in American agriculture is returned after having been classified as a controlled substance and illegal. On December 20th, 2018, the President signed the Farm Bill, also known as the Agriculture Improvement Act of 2018, into law. The signing of the act was great news for the hemp industry, which amended the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Hemp is now defined as the plant, Cannabis sativa L, and any part of the plant, growing or not, with less than 0.3% THC concentration on a dry basis. The plant itself is no longer a controlled substance. Hemp is one of the most versatile plants on earth. From clothing, fiber, paper, building materials, hempcrete, biofuels, CBD, and medical uses, it has been a part of America's industry for over 200 years. Even the United States Constitution was drafted on hemp paper. The time is now. If you're thinking of getting in the farming or processing of hemp, Contact our global experts, legal, and consultation teams to make sure that you're on the right road when you venture into the new hemp industrial revolution. Michigan Hemp Industries has been a leader and advocate for the return of the hemp industry, so come be a part of the new revolution in agriculture in Michigan.
Hi, I'm attorney Michael Komorn of Komorn Law PLC, and you are watching Planet Green Trees.
Potato.
Everything's silent anymore because
23 Skidoo.
23 Skidoo.
We're live.
We're live. Welcome back.
Excellent. Thanks for listening. We're back. Planet Green Trees, episode number 463. We are with special guest Eric, one and only former quarterback of the Detroit Lions. We're reminiscing of the Another One Bites the Dust era and all of those.
We are the Detroit Lions that nobody seems to beat.
Another one bites the dust.
That was one of the lines. We are the Detroit Lions that nobody seems to beat.
Add that 45.
It has evolved is like parking at stadiums. One of my memories of that season in the 80s was walking around the Silverdome, parking. I looked at my car. You know, my husband had to come in the game. You know, now that's much easier parking. There's a lot of improvement there. All right. So one of the things that came up, we talked about some great stuff in the break, but I want to move on a little bit. But the concussion protocol, or the recognition that these manifestations, diseases that evolve from these contact sports, especially brain damage, Lou Gehrig's disease, there's a bunch of evidence linking that physical, the ailments and the wearing down of the central nervous system are associated with some of the, the injuries he may have had, concussions, head things. And of course, the football is focusing on this a lot more. Explain a little about what's being done, and do you recommend parents advise their kids to play football in today's day and age?
Well, today, the football today being played at levels, they've actually minimized the hitting. This is a game that's been around for a long time. And so I think if you look around and talk to most people that played high school football, most of them are doing pretty well, so that's anecdotal, I know, but the science, the longer you play, the more chance you have of some sort of built up, could be brain injury. But it's kind of, the easiest way to do it is this. What is it actually that's causing it, right? And so we know smacking your brain isn't really a great thing, okay? And we know that helmets can even protect your head, but it's not going to protect the sloshing of the brain slocking back and forth, right? Rotational hitting does more damage than anything, because what it does is the white matter slides from the gray matter, right? And so it shears and tears your axons. And that can leave, diffused axonal injury, it's called, which are little hypertensities that show up where those stretching, takes place. And over time, some of those axons start to break. They teardrop, and then they break and separate. When they do, tau protein, these tangles get all involved. And so it starts spreading, and that's really the deal. So that being said, CTE, the chronic traumatic encephalopathy, may be just the inability for the brain to repair itself as it gets injured. So the repetitive hits is what causes that damage. A single big hit, concussion, doesn't. And so reducing the repetitive hits may, cause that not to happen, or really push it way off so you don't get the effects of it until, 104. I don't know. And so that's really the big push. Some people are different than other people. We all have our own genetic makeup. There's certain markers that show up that make it easier for people to concuss. Some people get Alzheimer's disease and some people don't. And so, so there's a lot at play at that. I think trying to get to the bottom of it, I know it's CNS, Center for Neurological Studies, it's here in Michigan, has done a lot of work on, they can actually go in with scans and look at the difference between a blast wave injury, like what happens with the IED in military, and a head hit. So they have a different pattern to them. And so one of the biggest things that showed up, and I think we talked about this at one point in time, Mike, is the pituitary function. So getting hit in the head a lot, those axons and stuff, pituitary dysfunction. So that means your hormones can be deficient. So we started seeing a lot of guys, we started testing and found a lot of guys deficient in testosterone and deficient in growth hormone. And if you don't produce growth hormone, of course, a lot of the other hormones that act and clean out the brain and clean out the system, and you pre-age. And so that's one of the things that possibly could be at the root of it. And that's the hypothesis of Dr. Benson anyway. But the biggest thing that the league is concerned about, has been concerned about, is the return to play. When do we let a guy go back if he's been concussed a bunch of times? When do we take a guy out of a game, to be safe? And so that's really where the center has been around that, not so much the CTE stuff. And because CTE is not even written in the concussion lawsuit. What's written into it is dementia, Alzheimer's, and not Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, yeah, right, and Al's disease, right. Those are the three things that are written in it. Even the 88 plan that helps fund players that have to be at home for their health care because they're got dementia. Even that has to have a dementia diagnosis to it. They don't classify it as what disease, right? And so so there's still a lot about out there. We just know that the way to minimize that is you don't practice twice a day and hit twice a day. You minimize the amount of times you do have a helmet on, or not a helmet on, but full pads or full practices. I think they have 19 times they can go full pads and put helmet on. I mean, we're doing 19 times in the first 5 days, right? So it's like, so a lot of that has changed. And so if somebody asked me about football today, I think I would say, yeah, go ahead and play. And if he starts getting injured, then make that decision then. But that's just my own opinion.
Sure. I didn't realize that was one of the changes, that they only allow much, but I know what you're talking about. Like even in high school football during the before school started, they'd have the football teams doing 2-a-days, and that would make or break half the team. Some people wouldn't be able to make it back after lunch. They dehydrate or something, they wouldn't be able to play. But that's an interesting.
I was down at a lot of the stuff on the deficiencies, the pituitary deficiencies, hormone deficiencies, has been recently, like the last 7 years or so, been a lot of study in that area. I was down at the Tampa Bay Polytrauma Center for the VA down there, and that's where the Southern Special Operations Command's down there, right? And I was at a seminar, and afterwards, one of the commanders tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I heard you talking about this. What are you guys doing?" I said, "Well, we do hormone replacement, for our guys right now. We test them hormone replacement, so growth hormone or testosterone, whatever they need." He goes, "We can't do that to our guys, but they're seeing these really low testosterone drops and growth hormone drops in their guys as well because of all the blast wave injury they're getting." So it's kind of there's still a lot more to be known in science-wise. Yeah, but
they won't let them do that anyway. Just in the military, they won't do them with that, despite the fact that they're probably a class of people that you could test and draw reasonable conclusions from, right? But they're not even letting you go there. That's interesting.
And I know you don't want to go too hard on this, but I'll just say this: Abbott Labs has a test now. It's a handheld device with an assay, so just a blood prick, right? And I can tell you within the previous 6 hours if you've had a brain injury or not. So it's fascinating technology. So they launched it, and all their published work has been done on it now, and so they've been testing it in hospital emergency rooms for a long time. Interesting stuff. So maybe we'll have an answer there.
So I want to talk about now some of the things you've done since your football playing career. Obviously, you're still involved, but you're real, arguably as successful as your football career is your after football career in the area of speaking about, discussing, writing about, talking to others, consulting, coaching, and speaking to schools, etc., about mental health issues. Obviously, it's an issue that plagues all communities. It doesn't discriminate. There's multiple reasons that bring it about. Your story is well documented in terms of you lost a son, and then you went through some mental health issues with you and your family. And coming out of that is where you got your motivation and drove you into this. And it's your passion and something that I love hearing you talk about. And I know you've got a lot to say that I could listen to you talk about this all the time. One of the things that you brought up before, which I think is so relevant right now, is you mentioned the transition out of professional sports into regular life, the civilian life, and how that impacts people's mental health. But and speak about that a little bit, and what we can learn from your message for those of us that are gonna have to go through this change into this transition of the post shutdown and lockdown of this pandemic we've gone through. What can we give us some parallels and some tools maybe that you speak about to your people that we can all our listeners can draw from, if you would?
I think one of the biggest issues, and this has to do with suicide ideation as well, is hopelessness, right? When I feel no hope. And when we go through this major transition, there's a lot of identity crisis that happens. The person that I was before this transition happened. I'll just use a football player for a second. Football player, since 9 years old, we put a uniform on, and all of a sudden I'm 32 years old and it's taken away from me. I'm kicked out of the league. I'm cut. So who am I? Right. And so now I'm left with, I don't know who I am. So I feel lost. Okay. I get a little worried, start getting anxious. I feel kind of rejected because I don't want this to happen to me. And that means I also have grief because I lost a person. I lost who I was. I don't know who I am now. And so that part can really set off a lot of mental health issues, especially if there's been any type of mental health issues in their past. Maybe as a kid, some sort of trauma or something, then it resurfaces and this thing can really hit somebody. So just being aware that there's going to be a major change. And one of the things we can do is realize that the person is not what you did, okay, in your previous life. Well, I was that, and so that's who I am. No, that's what you did. Who you are is who you are. And you can be anybody that you want to be, but first figure out who you are. Look at your own value system. Sit down and look at it and say, what do I stand for? What is my ideal? What would I like to be? Who is my ideal self? Because when you find that portion of it, you can then, tackle on other things. And so part of it is just that self-discovery and self-identity, but rediscovering your identity, not getting tied up to the past, what that identity was, but who you can be. And that's a big part of it. Stress and anxiety and fear is a big thing. We get locked into fear because it's like, I don't know what's going to happen next. This just happened. When we come out of this, will I have a job? Will I not have a job? What about my finances? How to take care of my family? All that anxiety that happens. And we need to focus in on what we can control. Because if we start worrying about all the things that are possibilities that are out there, they become overwhelming. And that means, and I get locked in and that fear kind of takes over and I don't do anything, right? Except for maybe depression or anger or more worry, more anxiety. And so some of the things that we can do is focus on the things that we can control. I can get up in the morning, I can, say good morning to my family. I can have my coffee, I can go online and look at things I can do, if there's another job out there, or connect, but just those pieces in itself, the things that we can control, because the other things will fall in place, as we do that. And some of them are scary, but there's always a solution. Sometimes it might not be the solution that you want or dreamed of, but there is a solution, and death isn't one of them. So let's take that off the table and think of the things that there is a solution for. And oftentimes in that reinvention of yourself and rediscovery of yourself, you find out there's more possibilities than you ever dreamed of. And when you open yourself up to that, things do pop in. Now, when I say that, I know there's people that say, oh yeah, well, that sounds awful easy, for you. But, I've gone through some, major changes. And myself, I went through an ordeal a year ago, right? And I thought, everything's done, over with, lost. Fortunately, with a little bit of support and everything else again, and saying, you know what, it's not over, new beginning. And that's a big deal, so it's focus on the things you can control. Even if you get nervous, sit in it a little bit. It's okay. You've been scared before, right? Things have happened in the past, but always with those things come wisdom. What did you learn from it? Instead of focusing on the fear ahead, what did I learn from the past? And so that's part of it as well. Having a place to go to get away from, from the chaos and stuff. And sometimes that just is up here in your mind, where I can close my eyes and imagine a place on a beach, crashing waves, and just take a minute and sit in that spot for a second and just breathe, breathing helps bring down the stress out of your shoulders, out of your neck, and able to breathe again, then it relaxes things. And so it makes it able to think again and get you out of the fight or flight response. But that's some of the stuff.
You were discussing the loss of identity when someone has your career, their entire life, they've been doing something like 32, 33. It's not even like rediscovering. It's almost like just finding who you are, because for your entire life you may have actually just been that. Like, I'm sure that is it's more pronounced, I imagine, for athletes that have devoted their entire lives and made it to the big show, and then all of a sudden it's over. Now what?
Similar for police and military and service people too. I can tell you that, like, when I retired, 6.5 years ago now, and it creeps up on you, Eric. All the things you're talking about. It's like, hey, I'm happy I'm retired. This is great. I'm leaving this place, good and gone, not wearing this uniform or putting a gun on anymore. And then things just it starts creeping up on you. The identity crisis you start having, and feeling worthless at times, like I'm nobody anymore. I used to be this great police officer, and I put on my uniform every day and protected the people, and now I'm nothing, and that's how you feel. That's a lot to get yourself through. And then you dip into the alcohol and things like that. And then it goes really downhill. And I know a few guys that are still going downhill, and I was glad I was able to pull myself out of it. And like you said, look forward and be the best person you can be moving forward.
Well, and that's hard to say to somebody that hasn't found that yet, because they're still struggling.
Right.
And so, as you went through it, there's some point in time where I finally say, the light goes on and says, oh, okay, I can do this, right? Or I can deal with this. The hardest thing, like I said, is when you're tied to the past. Because when we keep going backwards, we're never going forwards, right? And we don't even know what the possibilities are, right? And they be standing right in front of us, and we won't see them, unless we're looking that way, right? And that's when you start talking about identities, and this goes for somebody who's retired, somebody who lost their job, somebody who went through a divorce, somebody got misplaced because of a storm. I mean, there's a whole lot of transitional stuff that's out there, and just
a huge legal ordeal.
Amanda said a huge legal ordeal. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Life-changing events.
Anytime you feel like you don't have control.
Right.
Like you lost control, and certainly the legal system can do that to you, right? So it's like, wow, yeah.
The things you're mentioning are, in every sect of our society, just like the pandemic is affecting everyone differently, right? Some people bother them, some people are tortured by it, and the wide range of people. Some people like the fact that they don't work, but they can't stand being at home with the people that they're with. I mean, there's hundreds of different scenarios, and then
I've embraced it.
That's right.
Well, what
I want to make was that the questions and the things you're talking about are really the questions that everybody struggles with. Like, how do I live a wise life? Like, why am I here? What is my thing? What am I going to do now? And
existential stuff, right? Yeah.
Right. But, and I think, there's people that, have come to some grips with that and have decided something, they resolved it with some philosophy, religion, or, some other way of thinking that, help guide them and whatnot. But in the things you mentioned, without, just in a very secular way, try to control the things that you can control, being present now. That's a common theme in what I think all of the schools of thought to ease your anxiousness, right? There's only now. So be the best you can right now as a common denominator. And a lot of which, like I think you can pick and choose from different schools of thought, philosophies, whatever. But I've been digging the Stoics lately, the Stoicism and whatnot, and how, Mark, I don't know, there's the whole school of thought on this, but ultimately they came back. One of the things you said reminded me of some of their thinking, which is you can only control yourself, really, in how you're going to react to things. That's what you have to control. And by giving that up, by getting in fear, anxiety, being upset, that's losing the one things that you have that you can control. And I don't know, like Ben Franklin, whatever the what was his? I was just looking at that the other day. The Little Richard's Poor Almanac or whatever. Everyone's like, this is how to live. This is the way to think and to things to explore and that balance life and work and home and so.
Did you say Little Richard's Poor Almanac? I just want to clarify that.
Richard, what is Poor Richard's Almanac? There's the Ben Franklin.
I'm going to look for that disc at my local record store right now. Little Richard's Poor Almanac.
Put that up.
Look it up.
I think Michael's the only copy.
That is awesome.
But Ben Franklin was famous for some famous phrases that told you how to live. For example, early to bed, early to rise, and your gal goes out with other guys.
Hey, Michael. So here's the one thing you're driving at, right? What can you do? The one thing, okay, that we have, okay, that if we always have choice. I mean, people don't think they do. They think I'm trapped. I have no choice. They made me do this. But you have choice to make the next step on everything that happens. So when this happens to me, I get to choose what I do next. If this happens, I get to choose what I do next, right? And so we're not really trapped. It's an illusion that we have because we feel like, oh, this happened to me, as opposed to saying, here's the thing, okay, I get to choose my way through it. And so we're always able to make the choice. I get to choose to be happy if I want to smile. It's really hard to smile and frown at the same time. If I smile, that makes me feel better. I have the ability to choose, do I get up in the morning or to lay in bed? It's a choice I get to make. I mean, so we do get to choose on the things we do. We don't get to choose the things that happen to us all the time, but we do get to choose what we do about them. And you said it as a perfect statement. That's probably the number one key to mental fitness is right there. Just understanding that I am in control of myself and my choices.
There's not a lot of athletes. I can't think. I mean, one comes to mind just as a natural, but who like reinvented themselves in a completely different personality. Like Mike Tyson comes to mind. I don't know. Like he was such a, top of his thing, and then went off the rails, and now he's like totally, reborn and doesn't even like that guy. You know what I mean? Doesn't even like that guy. I'm now this. You hear him. He's kind of got his whole new. Maybe it's an act. I don't know. But
he doesn't like that guy, but he's stuck with the face tattoo, though.
Well, not much you can do about that.
Yeah. Lesson to learn, kids. No face tattoos.
Yeah.
Are there other people that you think of that are like? I mean, there's obviously people in the post-sports industry, playing, like in media and whatnot. But who else do you know that, other than yourself, obviously, who've risen in that regard? Are there other people that come to mind for you in the sports field that have been able to really reinvent themselves in other ways?
I think of guys like, for me anyway, like guys like Randy Grimes. Randy Grimes was a starting center for Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 10 years straight in a row, right? The last day of the 10th season, as the coach walked out, patted him on the shoulder and says, "We won't be needing you next year." By this time he had built up a huge addiction, right? And so the way he dealt that, he crashed and burned and lost everything. His rebuilding has been phenomenal as far as who he is as a person. Is an amazing guy, right? And so he goes out and he helps other people, but his transitional into that was devastating. And you would think there's never going to recover from this, and yet he did. Eric Kramer, a good friend of mine who ended up shooting himself in the head. But he recovered from it, believe it or not. It's a miracle, is how people would say it. But here's a guy who's now, he goes out and helps people. He's worked with his immediate family. He goes out and helps other people who were kind of caught in systems that were legal systems by guardians. So he's completely reinvented himself as well. So these are really drastic cases, but a simple reinvention. Here's the one thing that amazes me. Okay, I would never know what it's like to be in your shoes. I would never know what it's like to be as a police officer. I never know what it's like, and it'd probably be hard to imagine, being on a field and getting booed by 80,000 people. I'm just joking. But anyway, that being the case, but we all have the common denominator of feelings. If you say I feel sad, I know what sad is, right? I can relate to you on that. If you say you're happy, I know what happy is. I can relate to you on that. So I might not have your circumstances. I might not have, be in your shoes, but we are related through feelings because that's common. And so that's how we connect. It's not connect by trying to compare stories. Well, my story is this story and that story is that story, right? Or how could you be upset at that? I mean, I went through this, or something like that. It doesn't matter. It's the feelings that match. And that's where we connect at, If we can bring, little hope to somebody, we save lives.
Yeah. The other thing, a common denominator, I think, of what you just mentioned of those two heroic stories of the people you look up to is that they found a purpose where they were, you know what I mean? Anyone that knows what it's like to go to a job and not feel needed, hate it, versus, knowing that people are relying on you, there's such a difference. And it makes, anyone that can find that should be fortunate, right? And it's a value. So, but the things that you mentioned there, where the people found themselves assisting others or engaging with others, where they were able to empathize and give of themselves in a way that the other people were benefiting, I think is, another way to find a place, place that gives importance to one's life and, adds to the wisdom of living or whatnot, if that's a thing, but it's, I think everybody's struggling with that, and it's going to be interesting to see, I guess, with this.
I think coming out of this is a huge transition, like I said, and for a lot of people. I mean, for the country itself. I mean, financially, for individuals, how they do their job, how it's going to be. It's just going to be a lot, and there's going to be some people that find niches and do super well. Every time you have a big changeover, right? Something happens. There are some that find it just happens to land on them. The computers when it went PCs, and all of a sudden jumped out. Whoever had the software and stuff just took off, right? Social media when Facebook all of a sudden took off because it was ready for it, right? It wasn't because of the gentleman himself. It was just it was a frat trick, basically, is what it was. It became what it was because the world was ready to connect, and so those issues like that. And so there's going to be some people that pop out of this thing and just like, wow, how they do that. I think most of that, because they're not worried, they're looking forward, they're looking for the next opportunity. They're still in the mode of, I get to choose that I get up in the morning. I get to choose, to make somebody smile. I get to choose this, because then those things come to us a little bit easier because we can see them. It's not that they don't come to us when we're hurting, we just can't see them. But they're still there. So it's just about a matter of opening your eyes that way.
It's something I picked up on, and some people may disagree with me, but there's this kind of background experiment that we as humans are really social people. Like, we can't stand not being out and being with other people in some kind of way that's part of our regularity. And I just feel like my kids, they get a chance to do a drive-by, they want to get out and play. They can't stand that, the interactions kind of we're wired for it. But tell me this, and I'll show my bias because I know this. I think they said that the Masters, the U.S. Open, the Open, and the PGA are all happening after November, something like that. They're going to do them.
Yeah.
They're going to reschedule. They gave them dates, and I think they're going to have some tournaments where there's going to be no fans. Golf is one of the sports that one can social distance, whatnot. And I know there's been some talk of baseball moving it all to Arizona and whatnot. What do you know, if anything, about the football season, since it's the most popular sport?
The schedule just came out.
What's that?
I said the schedule just came out. I got texted about an hour or so ago.
I think something on the news. They're going to play without crowds, maybe.
Well, see, the wonderful thing about football is most of the money is generated by the TV anyway, right? And so it is one sport that you could play without a crowd,
Right.
Because it's a team against a team, right? There's a battle going on right there. It hurts the players more not to have the crowds because it really ups your, jacks you up, right? It gets that adrenaline really pumping, right? And you get to do some amazing things.
Now we're going to feel like practice,
right? Yeah, and it's going to be weird. My first guess, are they going to pipe in sound to make it really, really loud so it seems consistent to the players? Because you can do that with speakers. To a certain degree, you can make it super loud. So, but even to the TV crowd, if you hear noise in the background, it seems like you're watching a live game, as opposed.
Maybe
to
they can project Avatar crowd into the seats or something. That'd be great.
Better yet, could we get
go get a bunch of a few extras or cutouts and put them at like at least 2 rows deep. You know what I mean? So anyway, but the thing that we're concerned about was the player safety, because now you got players, and so how do you quarantine them from now? You know, seeing against other players and going home with their families and stuff. So that was their concern, was with the players themselves. That's where the main concern seemed to be. And I think they've got the best medical care. The NFL does, for their players. They got the best medical care, so I think they'll work that out.
But for those postponed golf matches that Michael just mentioned,
they're
going to be performed without players. Wouldn't it be better than to have the football announcers then broadcast those games? Instead of having somebody, now he's going to tap on the ball here, and then he goes, scores! The ball's in.
No. All right, Alan.
I don't think it's fair that golfers don't have people that can yell at them while you're golfing. That's just not fair. Make it like a sport that way. It's a fan sport. Forget about the golfer etiquette.
It is not fair. What also isn't fair is our production team is telling us we have to go to a break.
So I was going to let Eric go. He's been very gracious.
Yeah, thank you, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Yes, thanks, Eric.
Give Eric a big round of applause.
Double hips, Eric. Okay.
Eric.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Outstanding.
I will be back if we're not off the air, and we've hit our other topics that we're going to get to. Thank you, everyone, for being patient. I really enjoyed that Eric Hipple hero.
Yeah, me too.
Post. Thank you. All right, we'll be right back. We're not already off now.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Any additional input? Any thoughts on information being discussed today?
Talking to me?
Yeah. I am talking to you. You're the Michael.
Okay, that's good. I got a long list. I mean, I don't know how much time you're really offering to me. I've been
we're right
myself.
We've been so much ahead of schedule. We've got plenty of time. Just go ahead and fill it in a little bit.
You want me to do my introduction for Danko that I have ready? I have a great introduction ready.
He was hanging out. Man.
I know. I was excited.
I saw him burn in the room. Yeah.
He was like he was out in his porch or something. He's got a Wikipedia page, which I think we all should have. It's a good event. I think whoever's having a good time. It's unfortunately we're inside, but a lot of good themes that are coming out of this. Everyone recognizes how important the plant is, but we're still not done with the fight of making it, not penal in any way. Even the psychological impact that it's going to have, or should have, undoing much of the propaganda campaign against it over the last years. Oftentimes when we talk about cannabis reform, you can't help but to realize that all of the nonsense that's said about marijuana is based upon one of the greatest lies ever told, and the whole, making it illegal and prohibiting it and prohibition is all based on a political motivated decision by our former President Richard Nixon. And from there, all kinds of lacking in logic flows. So he's, it's a lot to protest about, a lot of damage that's been done over the years, and this is a great event. I'm glad to be part of it. Jamie, good job putting it together. Rick, you're the superstar. Tommy and Jim, Dan, Deborah, Amanda, good stuff. Good teamwork.
This was fun, really fun.
It's always nice to be part of something that's the first time around. I wish we didn't have to do it this way, but as Adam's mentioned several times and other people have referenced, this will take our annual event and add a whole new dimension to it. And it sort of kicks our ass into getting this done. Even if we may have envisioned it over the last year or two, this really forced our hand. So I think going forward later in 2020 or in 2021, it'll be a much bigger multimedia event that'll reach around the fucking globe.
And I appreciate Adam Brook and all the people. Adam Brook, I have to give another shout out to, of course. Thank you, Adam, for coming on the show Thursday and helping to prep this, and all your activity and activism for Hash Bash, and of course the Hash Bash committee, which granted us the opportunity to try to pull this off. And what do you know? I think we did it. Good job, everybody.
Everybody take a photo. Social media is where it is at. Next year, this should be 10 times as big. Post your photo. Next thing, if you got a joint, now's the time to pull it out.
And now I'm back on it. What's this? In the face of injustice, we stand proud and tall. Police misconduct drives us up the wall. We come in all shapes and sizes, fighting to be free. Jack-booted thuggery serves to charge our battery. We are the dildos for justice, and we are here for you. When you just don't have the juice to do what you must do, and when the police come calling cause you smoked a little grass, grab a dildo for justice and shove us up their ass. We do all the hard work at attention all the time. We may be rigid, but our justice is sublime. We vibrate with intensity, electric in our cause. When the cops don't have a warrant and they violate our laws, we are the dildos for justice, and we are here for you. When you just don't have the juice to do what you must do, and when the police come calling cause you smoked a little grass, grab a dildo for justice and shove us up their ass.
Nice.
Komorn Law. Michael Komorn is one of the top attorneys in Michigan that has experience and dedication in criminal defense law to provide clients with results. Komorn Law, the best damn criminal defense lawyers, period.
And now back to more Planet Green Trees.
All right, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. You're listening to Planet Green Trees, episode number 463. We're calling it Slow Train Coming. That may be revealed later on, but we're going to try to get back to our topics tonight. And I don't know if we decided for which one we're going to go to next. But Americans think cannabis is safer than alcohol, but social stigmas remain. Amanda, true or false?
I'm sorry, Michael. Say that again. True or false what?
The next topic, Americans think cannabis is safer than alcohol, but
He's trying to pay attention.
social
Yes, it is.
stigmas remain.
There's still a stigma around it. I think there's always going to be, well, I mean, it's lessening, but there's still a stigma attached to smoking cannabis.
I would think it's less of a stigma than the stigma being associated with being a drunk, at least in my opinion.
I think my neighbors have gotten used to me walking down the middle of the street smoking a joint from time to time.
Well, I'll say this, though. The DeRuyter opinion will open up the door to all kinds of discrimination against cannabis users that alcohol users don't experience. So we'll see over the next few months whether or not municipalities take out express themselves as anti-cannabis, Michael.
Well, I'm nervous about the outcome of what the DeRuyter opinion's impact. There's a videotape that there's a meeting with a couple of the representative government officials that the attorneys or city attorneys that represent the municipal league and some other cities that should remain nameless. And they refer to the cities as their clients that don't want this, that, and the other in their city, despite whatever state laws, and they've got focus and attention and eyes that they've been waiting for an opinion that gave them the authority to do something. So whether the opinion is intended to be what it is, you have people that are going to test those waters, law enforcement, from a law enforcement standpoint, or at least try to prohibit it. But in the context of this absurd idea that if cannabis is safer than alcohol, but a social stigma remains, yeah, I think so. And the reason that I think this is a compelling point is that article is truthful in some way, is that, think of the way in which alcohol has infiltrated our social, cultural interactions. I mean, you go to a liquor, if you watch a TV sporting show, there is commercials for beer. There's no place you can go without seeing the good-looking people, commercials, drinking alcohol, having a blast, right? I mean, that is where we are. The taboo in all of this would be to throw a joint in that someone would smoke. It's almost not a reality of something that's going to happen until such time as we begin to see events where cannabis is being smoked and that taboo is no longer, perceived as such, and it becomes a norm, just like someone picking up a cup, some soccer mom with her wine.
Red Solo cup, right? Yeah.
Walking her kid for Halloween, which I experienced. That's what some things that go on. You could gather a neighborhood, parents get drunk, kids are running around the neighborhood, and that's what's going on. Could one smoke a joint in public? You couldn't, but the point I'm making is that it is benign at best. That in interaction with alcohol. I mean, it's part of religious culture. It's part of a work culture to a certain degree. I get some drinks afterwards. Works gather at that surrounding those particular things. Jamie, what do you say to that? Or Jim? Jim has been quiet.
Can I respond?
Jim's got his red Solo cup. He's got some Bush Light in there, no doubt.
Can I just briefly respond to Rick's comment on DeRuyter? And I think the immediate impact of that is going to be, it's like at a race where the horses all run out of the gate. And those horses are going to be like city attorneys going after a case they wanted to go after for several years. In every one of these jurisdictions, there's been a problem person who people have complained about, maybe because of smell. And smell is the most common complaint that they have. But there may be other complaints, and they've been waiting to do something about it with their zoning laws, but they felt that they couldn't because of the Turbeek opinion. And now with the DeRuyter opinion saying that the zoning laws can coexist with the Medical Marijuana Act, that's like firing the starting gun for them, and they're going to be racing for these court cases and cease and desist orders on these nuisance cases, which they've had problems with over the years. And the best thing that people can do who are in the industry is just try and be a good neighbor, because if you don't get the complaint, you're not going to attract the attention of these zoning attorneys and anyone else. And so be a good neighbor and avoid and to have good smell and odor control.
Bullshit. This whole thing, I can't even take. I'm gonna ultimately get a chance to discuss, or at least comment on some of the comments that were made. And I have, unfortunately, the Zoom video recording that I began to watch. I'm looking at the individual that took over and dominated the conversation. And when you think about the context of what it is she's talking about, it's like she's been waiting for 12, 13 years for this. So whatever the beef was, and who are her clients? And if her clients have been unable to act and destroy these people that they so badly want to, and they've had to live with it for 13 years, get over it. You know what I mean? Like what kind of revenge, curse is that person living with? That this, person, like my clients want none of that, blah, blah, blah. We're going to go after them hard. Can't wait to get this horse run over people and drill them and whatnot. That's the message. While she's talking about kumbaya, I'm not even sure how these things are said in the same sentence. We'll get to that. This is an interpretation of the, the city attorneys that have complaints periodically or all the time, and they've been unable to take legal action, whether it's injunctions or civil, some kind of civil abatements or whatnot. Hopefully not criminal, but the manner by which this authority is acting is rather ultra authority.
Well, Michael, the real concern in my mind is that laws are passed in an ordinance style that affect caregiving throughout the entire community, not just the one bad actor Alan described, but all caregivers painted with one brush based on the colors displayed by that bad actor. And previously, caregivers had some protections provided, and it seems as if those have gone away. You know, we have to be more involved in our local lawmaking now than ever before to watch out for those type of things, because oftentimes those proposals are pretty sneaky when they like to bring them up.
You know, Rick, your points are really spot on, and actually emphasize even more the social stigma that remains, despite the fact that it's been voted legal, right? We don't want people arrested for it. We don't want people, you know, at the very minimum, the state, we don't want people arrested for it. The comments by the cities, townships has been, well, we may not want a business here, but we certainly don't want people to get arrested for it, is the mantra and whatnot. And I mean, I guess if you were going to reach into something and use it as a basis to kind of offset the stigma that remains, you could say, well, during the pandemic, these businesses were essential. Your city government wasn't even essential. You know what I mean? I mean, it's the absurd.
They thrived. They continued to pay their taxes.
Right? Jamie, what do you say to this? What do we, you know, Jamie, you were at that meeting with Sharmi where I think this particular individual made some comment of this regard, speaking on behalf of the Michigan Municipal League. I'm advising the local police departments to stay outside of the libraries where compassion clubs meetings were taking place. No use, not clubs where people were smoking or delivering, not the, you know, makeshift quote unquote dispensaries back then, but actual meetings, clubs where people would go to a library, hear a speaker, interact with a caregiver, learn some information, and leave. And they would take their license plate, pull them over because it was presumed they'd have cannabis, and they knew there were patients that were involved with it. You heard that conversation, right? Weren't you there for that?
It was in Dearborn. That did take place, and I was sitting a few people away from the mayor of Dearborn, and he said very audibly, "I can't believe she just said that."
Yeah. I mean, that was then. That was like 2009, 10, maybe 11-ish. I mean, it's 2000. What is it? 20? 9 years later from then. Whatever beef they had has evolved. I mean, the state has created a regulatory system, and you know, and they're allowed to. You know, this did not impact the recreational, obviously, right? And
like you said, the people are all excited on the meeting that you discussed, the local officials, about being able to do something about this 13 years later. Yet during that 13 years, there's nothing to point to that was a huge issue that.
Right.
You can't logic away hate. When people hate, you can't logic it away.
That's what I'm saying. Like think of the scenario. Like this city attorney's taking a call from a neighbor that says it stinks. This is in 2010, 11. Their response is, well, we can't do anything about it. Now 2020, we can't. They've gotten used to it, right? Or something. Something's happened. They've either, you know, I mean, what are they going to do now? Like why is now the time? You know, I mean, just because they got some. It's really kind of absurd, but it does go back to the social stigma. I mean, the justifications for the aggressive behavior interpretation that she was taking was, my clients don't like it. They don't want it here. They don't want it there. They've been trying to shut it down. You know, we're on the west side of the state. It's a very conservative part of the state and whatnot. I mean, Alan, you heard it, right? Is that, am I misspeaking?
Yes. Well, we have a similar situation here with alcohol. We have some places that don't allow bars by local ordinances and dry areas. And I think, you know, we're going to end up facing that.
Teetotalers, right? This is part of the American experience.
Right. But I know we have some areas that favor it, and I think they're going to get the benefit of the tax dollars, like Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor.
Those listening at home, teetotaler would be in the same library as Little Richard's Poor Almanac, just so we're clear.
It's Poor Richard's Almanac, but yes, Little Richard's Poor Almanac sounds better.
Right.
That's so great.
All right, so what about Ypsilanti in Ann Arbor? Are the stigmas still real there? Is it? I mean, that's a place where we're going to see it. Amanda, what can you say about Ypsilanti? Is there going to be?
Well, you know, it's kind of, I don't know if it's just because I'm on a daily surrounded by, you know, just like what we do on a normal basis, but there's a lot of activity, cannabis activity in Ypsilanti. So it seems kind of normal and natural and not really a stigma here. But if I were to have children that go to school or, you know, something like that, or it may be different. But yeah, there's definitely people have been programmed for a long time to dislike cannabis in every sense of the word and associate cannabis usage with poor character or, you know, some character flaws or something like that.
Being a gateway drug too.
Yeah, being a gateway drug as well. So it's really, I don't see that stigma is going to go away until, unfortunately, there's a shift in generations, you know.
Well, you know, I think one of the nice...
It's a gateway to good living, Michael.
Well,
that's right. It's a gateway to a good time.
Simulation of
I think about the recreational law, and I want to note Jamie and Jim and Rick and Deborah and all the other people that were so diligent in helping that bad boy move along and get passed, is that it does allow for these events, marijuana event organizer licenses of one of them, and also social use. So to me, unless you have those kind of the ability to do those kind of things, you're behind the eight ball and you're never going to get out of the gate. I mean, of course, the pandemic and the creation of those particular events have been stymied. The gathering, the social use is not a thing right now. And
my entire business is put on hold. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Rick's entire business.
You know, and we had Tom Beller from Real Leaf Solutions, who was one of the sponsors of Digital Hash Bash, and he also is involved in you know, hopefully having prospective events. But he was saying that just the insurance alone for the kind of event that they want to put on made it prohibitive.
9,000 a day, Jamie. Isn't that what he quoted us on Jazz Cabbage Cafe?
I believe that was it. Yeah, something like that.
Wow.
There's a daily fee, and then per booth you had to pay. So that fee is going to be based on how big your event is, of course. But
they're classed as high risk events. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, that goes to the stigma. The same thing. It's going to be. It's not part of the. You know,
the insurance companies all view cannabis as a intoxicant. They view it almost the exact same way they view alcohol in ways.
Charlie Streckbein said the same thing about getting insurance from Monroe Street Fair. He's complained about it every single year he's done the fair. He's still able to secure it each year, but it's one of his largest expenses and really delivers the least amount of bang. You know, insurance is invisible. You just pay for it. It doesn't bring any benefit to the attendees.
Yeah, unfortunately, you don't need it till you do.
Right.
That's right.
All right.
That's right, Jim.
All right, so we hit the
Just
other.
like a good lawyer.
Want to make sure you paid your premiums too when that happens. So the sweeping Weedmaps subpoenas. Next topic. We're counting down 10:08. We still got 50 minutes left. Jim, I want to hear your thoughts on this. The sweeping Weedmap subpoena underscores the U.S. government's continued scrutiny of the marijuana industry. What could they be talking about? It's kumbaya. Let me steal a phrase from that Zoom meeting with the city attorney. But kumbaya there's no federal raids. They're not going into Colorado. They're not going to California. They're going into Washington State. Feds have not been in Michigan, knocking out these businesses. What is this underscoring here of this industry's, the federal government's policy on the marijuana industry? And do you even know what I'm talking about? Should I tell you a little bit more about the subpoenas, which were for that the federal grand jury subpoenaed served many of the Weedmap owner and group, and it was an eye-opener for many in the business. So proclaims the article here, and the reason why is because the subpoenas didn't disclose the identity of several other high-profile California companies named in the document originally, and they list all those companies here. And the subpoenas were for a wide-ranging demand for information that serves as a reminder that the U.S. Department of Justice would not allow the industry to operate unpoliced, even years after largely unfettered growth at the time when marijuana remains illegal at the federal level. So this is an interesting phenomenon because many of the publications, advertisers, Weedmaps, I remember Craigslist was a contributor. They're kind of a local Weedmap, I guess, in a way. But, you know, they were servicing and creating the business that was going on here, right? How did you know where to go to buy your legal or illegal cannabis? Go to Weedmaps. Are they not responsible? How do they get away with it? And is this just now, Jim, that the U.S. Department of Justice seemingly, you know, wants to get involved with this? And how much money do they make from the support of this information about where to get illegal cannabis? What do you say?
They're looking for tax revenue, really, to be honest with you. They're looking for people who misreported what they earned. Wouldn't you say so, Jim?
Absolutely. I mean, they're going there because Weedmaps is an aggregator for the entire industry. This is when the shit show begins. This is the first step.
Well, what you're getting at is, number one, the premise and suggestion is that this is not anything other than an investigation for revenue and tax laws to the federal government, and that there isn't really an issue of any kind of illegal criminal sanctions that are going to be involved here. And what you're suggesting is this era of the policy of the federal government, Justice Department, this era that we're in, is not so much about criminalizing or public safety. It is about economic recovery for tax dollars. Now, I would say to you, Jim, that I know that this is a thing that's developed and has been the pattern in other states that have been a few years ahead of Michigan, that much of the focus in the area of this business has been on audits and compliance issues. And it can certainly be a setback to your business as it's developing if you are not in compliance and have not conformed to rigid requirements in order to function as a business, and getting hit with an audit or hit with some kind of sanctions because of that can devastate and set the business up. So we've been aware of this at Komorn Law. We advise people. We serve as an assist in that capacity. And it's something that all businesses need to be thinking of, but certainly the cannabis business is that much more extreme. But this is an interesting dynamic because they recognize, I thought that there were some concerns here in the article that they were looking for, is it your position, Jim, that the people that they're going to be going after shouldn't worry about criminal sanctions and it's only going to be financial sanctions?
Hell no, that's not my position.
No,
I definitely
took money from everybody, right? I mean, they took money from illegal actors as well as legal actors. So their database is going to be a treasure trove, right?
Absolutely. They will do what they.
That's a very bad sign of direction. That after
I thought
laying off.
I thought the feds were going in the other direction and staying away from marijuana cases recently.
They gotta pay for all the stimulation, I think.
It's gonna fund the wall in Mexico, baby.
That's right.
Yeah.
Listen, if the question was, what are they going to do with this information? Let me quote the Eastern District of California U.S. Attorney McGregor Scott, which is only a name that you would give to a future U.S. Attorney, McGregor. The stakes are high. Federal government's involvement in the subpoena of companies named in the subpoena. Quote, you only present the case to the grand jury to determine or not there's probable cause to return criminal charges. So this is a criminal investigation, said the San Francisco-based attorney Henry Wachowski, a former federal prosecutor who's worked in the California cannabis companies for longer than a decade.
Dodging taxes is a criminal, is a charge, right?
It may be something else. I mean, I'm telling you that they're presented to a grand jury. If the
you know what? Let's say it is something else. You really think the subpoena they served on Weedmaps wasn't a, oh hey, I just need a little stack of papers over here subpoena. It was a give us all your shit subpoena. Yeah. And you think the government is going to take all that information and then not do anything with it?
No. They're definitely going to. Here, the other thing is with Weedmaps having a presence all the way across the United States, there can be an argument that they facilitated drug transactions across interstate lines. So when you talk about criminality, I mean, Michael, gracious, wow.
Well, the grand jury is, and whether there's charges are returned is the way the federal government indicts people. That's what they're talking about here. Then, so the subpoena requested a wide range of company documents, including annual financial statements, tax returns, and bank account information. Seems to be economic. All communications with any persons engaged in commercial cannabis activity. That's pretty broad and probably could include a lot of people. Details on Weedmap facilities marijuana deliveries. Weedmaps claimed that it would cease carrying advertising for illegal cannabis retailers. I do know that that was an issue that they were asked nicely. Maybe there was some legal action where an agreement was made, and I know that they were then subsequently accused of continuing to advertise
illegal delivery services here in Michigan, just to be an example, right?
Correct. And then any transfer of anything of value between Weedmaps and government officials or candidates for public office, as well as all communications between Weedmaps and government officials. That's kind of interesting, isn't it?
So let me just say this. Even if President Trump doesn't get reelected in November, an investigation of this magnitude would certainly eclipse the 6-month period, Michael. Wouldn't you say? I mean, with your experience, it takes longer than 6 months for them to process all this data, get charges ready, and put forth. Even if the next administration doesn't have any interest in pursuing criminal charges, the feds are always going to be interested in pursuing tax charges, no matter who is in charge of the White House.
I agree. And there are 40 marijuana companies that are identified in the subpoenas that may have not been licensed at the time. There, I mean, some of that stuff that, so those are all, I think, vulnerable candidates. In other words, there's some entities that were not licensed by the state because there was no licensing. They then got licensed by the state, and they so happen to be a client of Weedmaps in both of those scenarios, right? And that's a predicament, one would think, because clearly the licensed business now wants to comply, and they have to respond, and they got to keep their license, and they may have to be answering questions about things that were occurring in a time that was not even in conformity with the federal government's policies. You know what I'm saying? Because there wasn't a regulated state system, so to speak, as being one of the requirements. All communications and agreements with 9 specific investment firms, as well as prospective investors. It is, I want to say this, the commentary of the lawyers in that area was that there was, here's one, just because you get a subpoena doesn't mean you're the target of an investigation. It's impossible to know if those targets are within Weedmaps or if they are the other entities. Good question.
Not false, but pretty
implausible.
Understand that the way the federal government works in investigations like this, they start with who they can get, they charge who they can get, they work their way back from there. That's a good investigative way that things are done. Here's another one. The subpoena was sent to Ghost Management Group. The only consensus among the 4 different industry attorneys who viewed the subpoenas is that it's so broad that it's impossible to tell what investigators are after. There could be a million things, says Jessica McElfish. So that's where we got to leave it. I think it's quite alarming. Obviously, we could all think about the vast amount of liability that a lot of people would have nationally or even here in Michigan, right? In terms of how we have been, unfortunately, come to recognize how marijuana involvement can torture people, right? The reality, though, is whether the charges would be brought and whether they would do this is another story. I think it would be futile to do it in state court, in the state of Michigan court, but the feds have been, effective at convicting people in federal court, even at times when the state itself is legal. Like we know the Danny Trevino story, which is still tragic and doesn't make any sense. Absurd. But please comment those in the know and let me know if I've spoken too much or you want to speak, comment. Jamie, what do you say?
Well, about anything in particular, or just
You're paying attention. Okay, that's fine. The topic of the subpoena.
You got busted this time. You got
necessarily
busted this
mean I
time,
wasn't
buddy.
paying attention.
Pot,
I was looking
kettle.
right at the screen.
Jamie is the kettle.
Online chess. He's playing online chess.
I would like to see on that Weedmaps.
He had his eyes
Jumped to
open.
conclusions, man. I was
Okay.
I believe that he was sleeping.
By showing of hands, who is paying attention? Jim, are you paying attention? Okay, Jim. Jim, you go. Okay, there we go.
I was paying attention.
We're talking about the subpoena, but what about it?
What's going on here? I mean, is this fucking? I mean, speculate.
I think it's pretty scary that they're collecting data from anybody who's ever marketed through Weedmaps before.
They are going to do something with that data.
Yeah, they're just, I mean, that's a lot of ammo right there.
They're coming
Because,
after it.
I mean, they're talking about, yeah, that's pretty concerning.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're gonna
I have a couple comments on this. Number one,
down to the IRS building. They're gonna talk to their IRS buddies, and they're gonna say, "Hey, let's compare my list to yours, and let's see who doesn't show up." That's what's gonna happen to the folks.
How come this guy got 60,000 responses on Weedmaps, but only declared $50,000 in income?
Right.
a couple things.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions about these subpoenas. Number one, it's not clear to me what all the information they're asking, as far as their list and what to produce. And number two, when the other thing is when we ask the government for information under the Freedom of Information Act, we have to pay for it on a per page basis. And we also have to pay an hourly fee for their clerk to look up all this information. And sometimes these Freedom of Information Act requests can run huge amounts of money, $50,000, $100,000. I've heard of requests running this large. So my question is who's going to pay for all this work? And, is the government going to write a check here to Weedmaps for $100,000?
We're just going to pull it out of our stimulus money.
It's a bad sign. I mean, instead of kind of like laying off and allowing the new industry to emerge without those kind of obstructions like that, they decided to kind of go after it. They hadn't for a while.
Don't forget about industry pressures, though. You've got licensed individuals out there who are paying the state of California, state of Michigan to be licensed. And then they're competing directly with someone who didn't pay for a license. So they're pushing Weedmaps to stop, but they're pushing the government to get involved. And unfortunately, those type of players have a very fertile ground with the Trump administration. We've seen how money buys influence in Washington, D.C. in the last couple of years. And you can see where they would be instigated to take action like this.
Think of the forfeitures. Think of the forfeitures at this point now in all these legal states and everything else, and they come after everybody. Imagine that forfeitures. They'll call it a RICO and they'll own so much. I mean, there we go.
Well, Steve, what you do is you let the industry mature a couple of years so people have some big bank accounts, and then you get the whole damn thing.
They like doing that.
You take this shit.
I was going to say something.
Good thing we're on the federal list now.
Listen, I was going to say that one of the things that I think is kind of important, and I can say that, we know and understand that the current existing administration has a different view of cannabis than previous administrations. In particular, I reminisce today, we did have Gretchen Whitmer on Planet Green Sheet. I sent that video around. Jamie, remember? She was on actually.
I do. I set that up. I set it up formally through her office.
Formally.
Person.
Which is why we like to say you are responsible for everything. The topic of Senate Bill 660 or something like that. Yeah. She also was talking about tax and regulate, and we got to revisit it and blah, blah, blah.
She wanted to make amendments to it that would essentially legalize it.
She hit her backs on that, on SB.
It was great. But the point I was getting at was that there is still, I would say this, that despite all that we see here and all that we love and adore, maybe, there is a view that is the non-compliant business activity will get prosecuted criminally, not for marijuana activity, but for other types of non-compliant crimes.
And you'd probably rather be prosecuted for the public health code violation than end up in tax court.
Well, there's not tax, like there are tax crimes in the criminal code. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a litany of them that you can be charged under state law.
Yeah, you go to federal pound me in the ass prison on those charges. So.
State, I'm telling you. So they're like white collar state crimes is what I'm talking about. But there's misdemeanors. They're not, and they're called white collar because it deals with financial, activity or whatnot. But that is what if I was to be a nervous Nelly or a, what kind of, thinking like a lawyer, I guess, worst case, best case scenario, that is, and I say this because I've experienced that this, I think, is going to be the position of the state moving forward. And there's a lot of things that are happening at the same time. This Druder opinion, the ending of the caregivers' entry into the market via recreational, and then the wind down to October, right? Is that the deadline for caregivers who can enter into the I don't even think they're not letting brownies or any other kind of foods in anymore.
They've limited caregiver contribution to flour only, no modified products.
And the plan is that the licensed facilities are going to be producing on their own. They're not going to be relying on any other outside non-licensed sources that are non-state licensed sources. Not going to be a source for the shelves of any of the stores, medical or retail, in the regulated industries. I think where we're going with this, which was the plan in 2016 when they created the MMFLA and wanted to create their own state, wanted to create its own source of cannabis supply chain, even though they had 45,000 people at the time, still do, that would have certainly were available and stuck their neck out been beaten on and abused for many, too many years to mention. They ignored them. And this is a point in time, and it should be, we should talk about it more. It's a point in time that—
Michael, don't forget one big development that helps in the release of the caregivers from the system is changing the definition of a plant to allow clones to not be counted against plant count. Jamie Lowell, you know more about that. They changed the definition of a plant to increase the number of plants you have.
That's for sure that's in the commercial system. I'm not sure.
Right. No, but I mean, you increase commercial production, so you have less requirement for caregiver contribution. If you want to edge caregivers out, make it super easy for cultivation centers to replace that supply.
Whereas, right, caregivers didn't have that benefit. There was a definition that worked against them.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm a little confused on that because I thought they changed the definition of a plant in around 2016 with Ventura and then in the legislature to expand it to include clones, to say that if you took a cutting and put it in media and growth media, that was a plant.
No, first of all, we're talking about there's 9 or 10 different definitions of marijuana plant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So true.
Never been the case. Originally, the criminal code, the public health code declared any part of the marijuana plant is marijuana, any part. So there's no plant or, flower, whatever. It's any part of it. So that's where we started from. Since then, we've got the Medical Marijuana Act, we've got usable, we've got non-usable, we've got plants count, we've got quantities of volume limitations of dried usable, then we have the medibles. And as this has gone, then the new definition of what a plant is, which is, it's got the key factor in what a plant is defined by the MMA is that it survives by way of photosynthesis. Okay, so if you don't have the combination of water, soil, and sunlight, you don't have photosynthesis, the thing's not going to live. That's the definition of a plant. Okay. But moving on beyond that, the MMFLA created all kinds of new definitions, which include, amongst other things, seedling. There's a whole requirement. For example, could a caregiver, here's a good question, could a caregiver who is getting their B or C license that just happens to be at the 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away from their harvest of their caregiver plants, can they move those into their facility if it's been approved and they've been licensed, and then chop them down and test them and have them entered into the metrics? Jamie, what do you say to that?
I think under the MMFLA, there's a provision for that.
Not anymore. No, that's not true.
Right.
There's a limitation to that. It's got to be a certain size. They'd let you move some like plants and veg. Plants and veg would be the answer. You can move, but not in the 18 inches or less. All kind of crazy, rules of something specific though. But
yeah, I plead impossibility on moving those mature flower plants at that latest stage.
There's a thing called tissue cultures, which is nothing, neither. You know what I mean? And what is a tissue culture, anyways? How much THC could a tissue culture actually have? More than 0.3%? Is it not just a thing? Is a piece of green material? You know what I mean? Like, that's insane. Do any of these things actually have?
The overlap is a tissue culture is an alternative way to save the genetics of your plant without being a seed, and it's actually not capable of photosynthesis in that form. So it's a way to save it to a future time and then to get back into a photosynthetic plant from it.
And if tested, Alan, would it have greater than 0.3% THC in it?
That would depend on the culture you took it from. Yes, if you took it from a potent plant.
You're telling me the cell membrane that they're taking, calling it culture?
Oh, no. What I'm talking about is the buds you'd get from that plant when it matured would have that.
It's odd. They created a definition of something that by virtue of its existence is not going to be over a threshold that would make it a controlled substance. And they've got a monitoring system for how you can get it in and get it out of the system. It's insane.
Right. But no, I would doubt any tissue culture has, if it had THC, I would say it's nominal.
And arguably clones also.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you get a twig and a root and a leaf, whatever, you know what I mean? That's not.
Clones haven't triggered a THC production cycle yet, so technically they should be THC free. You're right, 100%.
So there's all this discussion about this kind of an anomaly because of the fact that we've got this new definition of what it is, and we're making such a big to-do out of it. You know what I mean? There's all these rules about the plant.
I find it amazing that all this stuff is on the law books, and they just keep layering it, thickening it up, and it's a plant.
Yeah, exactly.
Plant that helps so many people and harms no one,
and they make it so complicated.
It is.
We intended with the legalization program to just cut through all this bullshit and just really essentially make it so everyone no longer has to worry about any of these things, and yet the minutia have tripped us up once again.
Rick, I would hope that if a person messes up on the minutia, that it's not a jail sentence, but it's a fine or financial, a minor consequence to the business, and it shouldn't be criminal.
The fact that the federal government defaulted the cannabis sativa L plant to something that's not a controlled substance, that being hemp, has a major impact in the absurdity of these discussions. Unequivocally.
I mean,
it's just because all the planning and plotting was under this rubric of the federal government and their blah 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 blah. So, we can make all this stupid shit up because the federal government, but the federal government said, "Oh yeah, watch this." All that crazy little tiny stuff like that. It doesn't matter. It's not. All right, let's stop.
And by the way, I want to have my patent too. By the way, even though I'm not letting anybody else do anything, right? Yes.
Hold on. First of all, the Eric Hipple discussion with the neuroprotectant and football players always looking for that. I mean, it's like since 1972 they've had the patent.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
All right, Steve. Listen, it's 10:30. We're right on schedule.
Yeah.
No time for a break. Let's do the movie review. What do we got? Ready? Hold on.
In lieu of the movie review.
Let's do the movie review. You guys ready for any other?
I want to say something else first, though. But back to our discussion with Eric Hipple and how I was saying it's similar for public safety type people, uniform job people like that. When they retire, it is similar to athletes, I think. And
the identity loss, who am I?
And figuring out. And I just want to say that, you guys took me in and helped me reclaim myself and just be myself and move forward with something productive and things and everything that we've done here and the advocacy for medical marijuana legalization and everything. So I just want to thank you guys for that and giving me a purpose and helping me to reinvent myself. which is just really becoming myself. So thank you guys for that.
We love you, Steve.
I love you guys.
Hands. Can we take a vote to see whether or not we still believe Steve's an undercover police officer investigating us? Just kidding. Just kidding.
I don't think so, but I gotta admit, I had to. It took me a little while to warm up to him.
No, after Cannapalooza, I have no doubts whatsoever about who Steve is, man. Cannapalooza took the curtains away.
Yes. No, Amanda, I thought you warmed up to me quite quickly because the day I met you was on your case, and I met Zinzer in the stairwell with Michael, and I told him he looked like a dork. And I think you thought I was okay after we were telling you the story after we got up the stairwell.
Right. That was
Michael.
It's definitely not the typical cop.
He was like, you know what? He was like one of my kids almost. I did his background investigation for him to be hired in there. He was on my shift for a number of years. Like, I feel like I raised that kid, and then to see the crap that was pulled in your case is like, it's like being highly disappointed in one of my kids. Really.
Did you call him a little shit?
What's that, Jim?
I asked if you called him a little shit.
Yeah, no, I never did. But after I saw what he was part of in Amanda's ordeal, yeah, he is a little shit.
Karma's a B-I-T-C-H.
Yeah.
So that's all. It just comes around.
He told me he was a nice kid. I thought he had a good heart, but the cops, that just goes to show you what happens to the cops when they get involved in this whole business of narcotics enforcement, and takes good kids like him and
turns them into little shit.
Stumbled right into this, this crap, which was what Amanda's case was, which is a bunch of crap.
I saw him on another case, and I really think it was the forfeiture money that spoiled him and turned him from being a nice kid into an evil cop.
Well, yeah, see, if he brings money into the department, then he gets, he'll get another special assignment or another school he wants to go to or a leg up in his interview on the promotion, that's how it goes.
Well, they seized the money on this case right away, but they waited 2 years to institute criminal charges.
We're going into the Steve review of the movie time, and we're talking about this guy who
isn't it a Nick Cage movie?
His background.
Life hell.
The kitty.
That's the internet meme of Rick Thompson dressed as a cat. You don't know about that?
Kit Thompson.
Yeah, I saw that on the tax going around.
Kit Thompson.
Sometimes people call me a pussy, and that's probably what they're talking about. Okay.
There it is, right there.
But I think we do need to have some news next week, maybe.
Well, we'll give it a shot.
All right, let's go. What's the movie? Nicholas
The
Cage.
movie this week. So my instruction moving forward.
What is that? Michael Komorn's background?
Oh yeah, that's great.
No, turn it back, Michael.
Moving forward
Turn
from
it back.
last week was to review a Liam Neeson film.
Bring back the big dicks, Rick says.
You can't just flash that and then take it away,
Michael.
Come
You
on.
totally distracted us with the
What
previous
the
picture, and
There
now we
it is.
can't
Oh
even
my
focus
God.
on his movie review.
There we go. Yeah, they like to carry their penis around.
That's so hilarious.
Yeah.
They're not practicing social distancing.
Oh,
No, they certainly aren't. I don't see any masks either.
Social distancing.
If the tip of your dick can touch the tip of his.
Tip.
Yeah, if the tip.
Calm down.
They're too close.
That was the highlight of the post Eric Hipple show.
Look at the picture of my dragon who's shedding its skin. It looks like it's got a dot of weave on, doesn't it? Look at it. Seriously.
Looks like what?
See that? I don't know. My dragon is shedding, but it's got like a
Yeah, I can see
A flock of seagulls haircut. That's what it's got.
movie. Come on, do the movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Liam Neeson.
Okay, let's refocus.
Last week was Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Liam. Awesome.
So with that, this week was May the 4th. May the 4th be with you, Star Wars. Episode 1, The Clone Wars or something like that. So he was part of that film, and to me, that was the, I hate to say it, but it was the worst in the Star Wars series.
Which one? The Clone Wars?
It was Star Wars Episode 1, The Clone Wars. So it wasn't, you know how it went Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. Those came out in the 70s.
You're talking about the Jar Jar Binks movie.
Yes. And that's why I hate that movie, is because of Jar Jar Binks. Character to add to that film and really detracted from Liam Neeson's tough guy character in that film. So that I did that film, but I would like to do Liam Neeson again on another day because he does have some films that I've seen and enjoy. So I'll get to that. I can't tell you what, the real movie I want to review this week as a surprise, Bohemian Rhapsody.
Oh.
That was a great film. I never watched it. My son and I watched it last week. Oh, it was just a great film. Gave me so much more appreciation for the band, for Freddie Mercury himself. And, you know, it was just, and then that song. I mean, what a great tune. And that was like his masterpiece song. And I liked the way they showed that in the film. And, you know, they were in the studio just essentially just a group of friends just having fun recording that song. And just a great, great film. The guy who starred in it was an unknown. And, can't even come up. I don't even have his name off the top of me, which is bad.
He's actually starred in 2 Netflix series. He's got a lot of stuff under his belt.
Name? I can't hardly
Ravi. He's got that huge jawline, amazing jawline.
God, he was like the spitting image. Rami Malek.
That's it. Yes.
Played the role just fantastic, I thought. Has anybody else watched this movie?
I have.
What do you think?
It was pretty good. It was excellent. I will say the one thing that I was a little bit disappointed on is I believe Sacha Baron Cohen was originally slated.
Yes, he was.
Mercury.
Yeah.
I thought he would have been excellent as well, but
hold on. I heard that discussion about why it took so long to make this and why he did not end up doing it. Sacha Baron Cohen wanted to do it as Freddie Mercury in his full on rock star, hedonism, like where they were doing cocaine off of midgets' heads at parties and everyone's naked kind of stuff, which is what was going on. Right?
Midget cocaine, yeah, okay.
And instead, the fight was with Brian May, the guitarist, who wanted to, like the story of Freddie Mercury was half the story, but the full story was that the band went on without him or something like that. And that's what made him leave. They were like negotiation for 6 years and he ended up dropping out. Steve, does it have some post-Freddie part of it or not? I mean, like.
What do you mean?
After he died, does it go on to continue to tell the story of Queen as it evolved?
No.
Okay. Well,
no.
I mean, let's all be honest. When Freddie Mercury died, so did Queen.
Yes, he was definitely far and above the creative force behind the band, and the guys in the band were great musicians. And when he joined them, I think he added the personality to that band, that's for sure.
Brian May certainly did some work after Freddie died, but I don't think there ever really was a Queen. Who's going to walk into that pair of shoes? It'd be like trying to, couldn't fill Robert Plant's shoes in Led Zeppelin. You couldn't do it.
And for the first time, I was on TV the other day. I heard Adam Lambert singing with them.
Oh yeah,
I've been touring with them. Yeah.
I didn't like it. I don't think he did it justice. I'm sorry to say that.
Nope. Sacha Baron Cohen was so tall, though. I think he would be it'd be tough to sell him as Freddie Mercury because of the height difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Borat was like, what, 6'2", 6'3"? Dude's big.
Yeah, I think so.
Michael, I was on the call with Al Harrington today with Benzinga. They did a conference thing. I wasn't actually part of it, but who was that tall gentleman that we met in your office the one day? The large athlete?
Eric Coleman.
Thank you. Thank you. I could not remember his name. Thank you.
EC.
What a great guy. Nice dude.
You on the call? No.
No, Al Harrington was on the call, but Derek Coleman was who I was looking for. Al Harrington has Viola products. They have a dispensary in Detroit and all kinds of stuff. It's great. He's a wonderful man.
We were represented in some things for a little while. They're good people. Al's a great guy. And
yeah, that was a big winner for you. Let's brag about that one for a minute. That's a victory lap there, Michael. That was a great win.
It was a great win.
What happened?
Yeah, go and get Al. It was I don't know. It was a raid at a place that had gotten a temporary license to grow marijuana, and the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. And after they kicked in the place and ransacked it, they put it on the news, so everyone and their grandmother went over and stole everything out of the place. And it was an absurdity. And they brought a case, and we got it dismissed at the.
I sat there and watched Michael typing that motion feverishly, and he went to court that day, and bam, came back winner. That was a nice one.
Yeah, when Michael gets to write and the judges they want to revoke his pen rights.
Oh yeah.
No, they did that, and that's right. They did that in Amanda. That's funny. In the judge said, I said, you get my 17th motion to reconsider. He was like, listen, I'm taking away your fucking right to. I do for the jailers that keep writing me letters asking me to get out. So the judge, but at that same time with the Viola, there's another one in Detroit. The names can remain nameless, but it was both were situations where they were operating under the emergency rules.
Yeah.
Detroit police didn't know, left hand, right hand didn't know what was going on. That one was a little bit more enjoyable because they ended up not charging them, and they wrote us a check, like $275,000. Detroit Police Department to Michael Komorn and client, which we, they stole all this money out of their place. It was great. All right.
Yet, for years, you had dispensaries running down 8 Mile and Telegraph for years.
Boy.
All of a sudden, the licensing confused them.
You can't expect logic from the drug war. It's based on an illogical premise, and every machination of it is illogical in its function. Detroit's a perfect example of that. What a great opportunity they have to be a leader in the state, in the region, Midwest.
I think I talked to the police officer on one of those, and I was like, "What are you doing?" I go, "Why did you die?" I go, "Don't you know they have a license?" He said, "Well, they were over their limit and what they were allowed to have."
Limit.
I said, "They don't have a limit. They got the license there as much as they want."
Over the limit.
You moron.
They got way too much weed. You gotta go.
You can never have too much weed.
There are people that just want to push power, Steve. You know that.
Oh my!
People that just want to push power.
Oh,
not in my town.
Essential business.
And that goes back to the stigma.
Thank you.
It does.
Jeff Frazier, who I think was on earlier, give a shout out to him and everyone else that was listening. Still are. But he used to, we just come to these points in the discussion, and nothing makes sense. And the idea is like when the whole thing is based on a lie from the get-go, nothing. None of it makes sense. I'm reminded of. We're talking a little about philosophy tonight. How to live a wise life and things like that. And I, for some reason, looking at revisiting a favorite of mine. I talked to Jamie about it this morning. Albert Camus, The Plague. Anyone read this in their past or whatever? Jim, you got this?
I have not read this.
It's Tyler on because I know he likes to refer to it, thinks he knows. But it's It's so one of
Shiler on. Where is he?
so here's and I figured it out. Here's the thing. He's an existentialist, which is that, everyone's trying to figure out the meaning of life. How can he have fucking meaning of life? He talks about get a fucking train, drive 3 hours to work, sit at a desk, miserable, get on the train, come home. There's got to be more to life than that, right?
Maybe. I don't know.
So his conclusion of all this is that this could have been the name of the show, that life is fucking absurd.
This is Shiler's conclusion?
No, this is Albert Camus.
Oh,
Life is absurd. Life is absurd.
It is absurd.
The idea that we as humans that seek order in the world, in reason and logic, when the fucking universe doesn't give a shit about any of that. We're trying to reconcile the two of these things. It's absurd.
It is.
What are you going to do about it? The nihilist would say, fuck it. Nothing matters. But the existentialists say, I'm going to continue on and get in the fucking train and drive 4 hours and sit there for 3 hours, come back, because that's what it is. And that's how I do it. It's a difference. Anyways.
That's a reality for an awful lot of Americans. That's, the commuter lifestyle, making ends meet, check to check, hoping to God that you don't get ill so you miss too many days of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
The existentialist doesn't always hope to God, but same idea.
So are we wrapping up, or does anyone want to talk about Slow Train Coming real quick?
Let's wrap it. Yeah.
Okay. Let's wrap it up. We will come back to Slow Train Coming. Maybe I was ready to. All right. What up, Rick? Will you an album you want to come and defend sometime so we could be ready for that? Maybe we'll do a double segment.
Well, we've got 10 minutes to make it an even 11.
Right. I just did send Shiler a note to, I don't know if he's still awake, but you would have 10 minutes to join. I don't know if he'll get it in 10 minutes and be able to join or not. But we could review some Bob Marley music.
It's too bad Shiler's not here. We could talk to him about Eric Smith.
Yeah, that's true.
He's a big fan, I hear, actually.
I've heard
that's such a mess.
It is a mess. It's horrible. Really, really bad.
You live in Macomb County, Jim. That news has to be front page to you every single day. I don't hear anything about it up here in Flint. I bet you're inundated.
Oh, it's it's par for the course in Macomb County. I mean, the long storied history we have in Macomb here, Rick, and it's
when hasn't it been corrupt over there?
It's always been like that, I think.
Oh yeah, I think so.
I mean, I remember
Warren is one example.
Yeah, and I even remember, when I was a kid, all the crazy shit that would happen here, and it's always just been chaotic.
Well, I was a manager at RV and Furniture in Chesterfield Township there, and I've seen, some real bigwigs doing things I didn't necessarily think bigwigs should do.
Yep, it's not great, and we had Karen Spranger. She at least was entertaining. So.
Oh God, yeah, I forgot about that.
Is what happening with Eric Smith? Will that trigger a reopening of cases and another look at his possible bias and certain executions that he was involved in and stuff like that?
Particularly if there was forfeitures involved, I would think the answer is yes.
Someone should.
That's part of this.
He should.
It's not as if they got the money illegally. That's not a point, although I think they did excessively. It's that they got the money, not a question of legal. What did they do? They hid it. They didn't do what they're supposed to. They didn't acknowledge it. They didn't put it in an account that was recognized by, and certainly didn't report it to the county commissioner, because that was the whole thing. Later on, when they're like, "We're ready to write you a budget. What are all these other bank accounts with millions of dollars? Why are we going to write you a budget to do your policing this year when you got these hidden accounts? Since when did you, the executive branch, get in the business of getting money, raising money? How'd you get this money? We didn't give it to you. Not a thing." That started the whole problem. And the lack of transparency and operating in an area of government here where they're not designed to,
He also wrote some excessive checks for witness fees where it almost looks like he bought the testimony.
Yeah.
It makes some of his cases look suspicious because the law allows for a certain amount for witness fees, and he was way above that in magnitude.
And had services performed at his home by contractors of the county, so stuff.
That even, but listen, that is, I mean, look, the extension of that is that he's a top law enforcement official. The forfeiture proceeds can be used for law enforcement purposes. That is less of a stretch. I agree, it's ridiculous, but less of a stretch than writing a check to some voters out there for some charity, which he was doing. That to me is like buying votes. That's outrageous. He was doing a lot of that, having parties and inviting, that kind of stuff is the danger. I mean, especially when it goes unrecorded, unknown, not disclosed, but
he says he's innocent. So
listen,
the paper trail is all imaginary then?
I don't know.
I want to say that his troubles may be worse than whatever we can imagine because the federal government, I think, is investigating him.
Yeah.
Indict him.
And, he was pretty confident in that after, I think, his arraignment, Jim, when he came out.
Oh, they always are, man.
Declared his innocence, and the next day he resigned, Jim. Can you believe that? The next day.
Yeah.
Well, if you admit your guilt right off the bat, you don't have a bargaining chip to give up later on.
I think the dollar amounts may shoot higher than what they were revealing on the news. That was just what they were initially charging him with. And yeah, you're right. I bet you the feds are sniffing their way in there right now.
The feds are in Macomb County. I mean, it's not just at the county level. I mean, we have municipalities in this county that have accepted bribes, and the federal government is here, has already charged people in the past and will continue to do so. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Rizzo, right? Rizzo's horrible.
That's one of the reasons you don't see the Rizzo trucks anymore. They sold out that whole business unit to GFL. And that came.
Yeah, that was a whole scandal, all of that, wasn't it?
Yep. But the Rizzo.
The Kwame, right?
What's that?
The Kwame.
I don't think he's related to Kwame. No.
I thought there was some contract. They did some contract in Detroit.
No, Rizzo was Macomb County, and there was the allegation, and I'm not really sure what came up to all of it, but it was that they were bribing municipality leaders, and there were indictments, and people were charged, and people ended up being convicted. And
those garbage contracts are incredibly big money, and they're very lucrative, and they're decided on a municipality by municipality basis. So there is a lot of opportunity for corruption in that program.
I'm being told by our production people that they're about to fall asleep.
All right.
So we gotta go. So Justin and Tommy can go night night.
All right. I guess we'll allow it.
I guess that not everybody appreciates our riveting conversations.
Right. Jamie's looking less than
We kept that segment short. That was like an hour and 10 minutes. Let's chop that up. Just kidding.
Let's get the micro content out of that.
We got some micro content. Steve told you when it was. He took notes on it. And all right.
And break it up, pull it out of there, get it out there, get that message out there to people.
Any final thoughts or words?
Fuck Bill Schuette.
Happy corn.
Yeah.
Hope you guys are ready for another 3 weeks.
Yeah, she extended today.
What was the order today?
She certainly did.
The 28.
The order today, Jim. Go ahead. 10:15.
The order is 3 weeks. 3 weeks, and if you can't behave yourself, you'll get 3 more. Damn it.
That's right. That's right. And she also said, please do not bet on taking and getting your kids into summer camps. So any summer programs, do not commit, guys.
I saw a
Doesn't
news
apply to
program
me,
today
but
about
it does apply to some of you.
new illness that affects only kids that's related to COVID-19. It's scary. Watch that in your news. It's kind of frightening.
What's that?
A new version of COVID that affects children.
Yeah. Causes cardiac arrest.
Michael, how about this? If we have any clients that end up sentencing for something, we could see if they would give credit for time served during the quarantine.
On their house arrest.
That's a good technique.
How about that for a good
Yeah, that's a good strategy.
sentencing?
Don't forget to wash your
Tommy,
hands.
cut that out so that one.
I tried, guys.
How any jail time given to any defendant's got a pending case is balanced against the executive order keeping them at home. You might say that's not jail being at home. But what is the purpose of jailing someone?
Are we free to leave? Only if we need to go get food or something, or have an essential function or job.
That's true. I mean, the deprivation of their ability to work arguably could be one of the intended consequences of being locked up, right, Alan?
You know, say we start filing the motion.
Alan, we're gonna work on that. It's a good one. I like it.
Yeah, well, first you have to have somebody sentenced.
Yeah,
well, we're going to have clients that need sentencing that are listening tonight that may be out there on some sort of sentencing pending. Call Komorn Law.
Exactly.
File a motion to get you credit for time served.
More law.
Komorn Law. KomornLaw.com.
The judge, you've already been through enough.
KomornLaw.com. 800.
Good night, everybody.
800-656-3557.
All right.
Good night, Jim. Or good night, Rick.
Hasta
la Winnebago.
The Planet Green Trees Show.
Join the Michigan Medical Marijuana Association today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. The MMMA is focused on the well-being and safety of medical marijuana patients. The MMMA site provides the most comprehensive and up-to-date news on legal issues, politics, research, cultivation, as well as the various strange products and methods of cannabis use. Come join the discussion with the most knowledgeable and passionate advocates in Michigan today. MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org.
Welcome back. I was digging those tunes. I was jamming. Really, if I wore underwear, I would throw them on stage, but I don't wear any underwear. We'll come back to that. But anyway, I had someone really awesome to introduce you guys to. He is basically going to be the first ever virtual dancing and, the tunes coming out with the cannabis plants. Tom Wall is going to be jamming out with his plans, and this is going to be something you do not want to miss. Tom?
How's it going? So, hopefully, can you guys hear me well?
Yep.
Okay, you guys can hear me good? Okay. So, what I'll do is I'll just start off giving a little bit of an explanation on the technology I'm going to use to perform this. But this device takes two electrodes, one that hooks up to the leaf of the plant, and then one that hooks up to the root. And the one that hooks up to the root looks just like a spike like that, and it goes down in the roots. And through the two, what happens is it can register the electromagnetic fluctuations between the two, and it basically makes a wave pattern. To that wave pattern, assign musical notes per size of wave, allowing it to generate music. But the interesting thing about it is that when I got into this, and I've done it with all sorts of different types of plants, but that they not only can play music, but they can play music with you, and they seem to kind of respond to what you do. So I don't know how this is going to go, but I plan on obviously doing this in the diag, and I'll just kind of we're really going to be surprised to see how it would react to that many people around. But this particular variety here is called Cosmic Splooge, and the name of our band, Cosmic Knot, came out of trying to name a cannabis strain a long time ago. And it's the idea of looking for a particular flavor that's very rare. It's kind of like along the lines of Acapulco Gold and the Colombian Gold. You can't find it very often anymore. But this is the culmination of a lot of years of searching, and it's still not quite there, but we're really happy to have this. So this is the Cosmic Splooge plant that really started the whole thing in the first place. But I think we should have it all hooked up now. So let me turn up the volume and allow you guys to hear what it sounds like by itself, and then I'll chime in with it, and we'll try and do a duet. And then I'll let it back to you guys because I know we're trying to keep things rolling. So without further ado, this is the first time a cannabis plant has made music that I know of on any videos, let alone on a virtual form and live facet. So this is really cool. And the fact that this is for Hash Bash is even cooler. 50 years ago, people were going to prison for this. And now we get to have a plant play for everybody. So here we go. hopefully that translated well. The type of music has been called organoleptic music, meaning organoleptic is evaluating with the senses, and then flora meaning plants. So plants evaluate with the senses, creating music. So organoleptic music, it's a new variety that just kind of came to life in the recent times, and I've been lucky enough to somehow stumble across it and figure out how to play music with plants, and they seem to play very beautifully along with you. They kind of follow you. It's really strange. But I really appreciate all you guys getting together, and once again putting this on and making this happen still and persevering through all the madness. Really cool that you guys were able to do this, and thanks for everything. Thanks for having me on. I'm gonna let you guys keep on rolling because I know you got a lot to do still. So there's a bunch of amazing musical acts still coming up. So I think Nick Satel is up on deck right now, and then we got a few other artists after that are gonna be really awesome as well. So to hang out, chill out, and have a good time listening to some amazing music. Thanks everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks, Tom.
That was pretty cool, man. So that was the first. It was captured here.
But hashtag will work. Everybody take a photo. Social media is where this is at. Next year this should be 10 times as big. Post your photo. Next thing, if you got a joint, now's the time to pull it out.
Komorn Law. Michael Komorn is one of the top attorneys in Michigan that has experience and dedication in criminal defense law. Komorn Law can take your case from arrest all the way from trial, appeals, and even to the Supreme Court. The team at Komorn Law has the compassion and the experience you can look to for help in your time of need. Komorn Law has over 25 years experience in criminal defense. We have accomplished numerous legislative changes through community involvement and lobbying. Our award-winning law firm has a reputation like no other for keeping overreaching government accountable and in check. We have built Komorn Law for people who need lawyers to stand up to the system, fight back and win. Once we become your lawyer, you become a part of our family. Don't settle for less, just ask our clients. Komorn Law, the best damn criminal defense lawyers, period.